Next, Iteration Audio and Tomorrow Comes Publishing presents Nox Origins, Book 1, written by Lane Anderson. Prologue. With a final, tortured groan, the two massive stone doors, each a slab of granite that seemed hewn from the mountain's heart itself, yielded inward, reluctantly admitting a view into a seemingly endless stone hallway. The passage stretched behind them, its rough-hewn walls illuminated by flickering wall-mounted torchlights. The flames danced, casting long, wavering shadows that writhed across the ancient stones, hinting at the countless secrets held within. The air in the hallway seemed thick with the dust of ages, and the faint scent of damp stone drifted into the chamber. At the far end of the vista, the torchlights dwindled into mere pinpricks of light, suggesting a distance beyond reckoning. After a few short seconds, the 5 cloaked and hooded figures fully emerged into the chamber, even before the echoes of their footsteps could fully dissipate on the uneven flagstones. The figure second in their procession, Asmund, raised his staff in his right hand. With his left, he began to weave swift, intricate gestures in the air. A soft, almost inaudible incantation whispered from beneath his hood, and in each of the 4 corners of the room, small, self-levitating flames sprang into existence. They pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, just bright enough to cast small dancing shadows on the damp stone walls, yet possessing none of the harsh brilliance of natural fire.
Isando to the left, Rheneas to the right.
The leading figure, his voice resonant with authority and tinged with impatience, commanded.
Bar these doors, let no shadow of the outside world intrude upon this most sacred work.
The 2 figures flanking the rear of their company moved with a swiftness that belied their age, their cloaks whispering like rustling leaves in a forgotten forest. With practiced ease, they raised their staffs in their right hands, left hands weaving intricate signs in the air as hushed incantations escaped their lips. A deep rumble resonated through the chamber as the colossal stone doors ground against each other and slammed shut with a resounding boom. The impact sending a palpable vibration through the stone floor. Immediately following, the heavy thud of the bars falling into place echoed through the chamber, sealing them within its ancient embrace. The chamber itself was steeped in shadow and the dust of forgotten ages. The air within hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of damp stone, mildew, and a faint unsettling odor of ozone, as if magic itself had seeped into the very walls. Cobwebs, like ghostly tapestries woven by time and neglect, draped every corner, clinging to the rough-hewn walls and the unseen ceiling far above, where darkness held dominion. The uneven flagstones beneath their feet, worn smooth by the passage of ages and slick with a perpetual dampness, seemed to exhale a chill that bit at the skin and seeped into the very bones.
Quickly, Asmund,
the commanding voice continued.
Begin preparations for the summoning of the secret fire.
Yes, Master,
Asmund replied, his voice a taut thread of apprehension. He turned from the group, his crimson-tipped staff held aloft, and approached the leftmost wall. There, with a deliberate grace, he began his work. No mere tracing was this, but a weaving of potent symbols upon the ancient stones themselves. Around the chamber he moved, a clockwise dance of fire and purpose, his left hand weaving intricate signs in the air as he whispered the ancient incantations, each inscription a vital spark, kindling the secret arcana necessary for what was to come. As Asmund continued his work, Another of the cloaked figures spoke.
Master, who were the priests they had in their company? I've never seen anything of their like in all these last 500 years.
I do not know,
The man called Master responded, his voice low and troubled.
These brown-skinned ones, they are an unknown variable in all that I have planned for. Throughout these long centuries, I've never encountered nor heard of anything quite like what we have witnessed this day.
He paused, and for a moment his voice was thick with dread.
Though it pains me to admit, with all the knowledge and wisdom I profess to have accumulated in these many long years, these figures have been somehow entirely obscured from my sight. I cannot even guess at the time nor place of their origins. It is as if their very existence itself is somehow shrouded in a veil through which my vast gaze cannot pierce. Did you see how the very creatures of the forest answered their silent beckoning? The black wolves that emerged from the tree line, moving with a disciplined obedience no wild beast should possess. The flocks of birds, driven from their natural course, now a living beacon above us. There were no spoken commands, no whips nor chains, yet these creatures, intelligent and instinctual alike, moved as extensions of the priest's very will.
A chill seemed to settle over the chamber.
It is a power unlike any magic I have ever known,
The master continued, his voice now laced with a dawning horror.
Think on it, Geldrid. How else have they managed to track us across leagues and through wards that should have concealed our passage? They do not follow tracks. They command the very wilderness to guide them. Every rustle of leaves, every bird in flight, every creature of the earth. They are all eyes and ears for the order of purity. Our attempts to lose them have been futile, not because of their skill, but because of this unnatural dominion they hold over the natural world. There is no escape, not while they wield such a terrifying and unseen influence. Now then,
the one called Master exclaimed, his voice regaining its authority.
Time is against us, and our enemies swift on our heels. Geldrid, to the south, let us begin the ritual.
With a gesture, Master bade them begin the central design. 4 staffs moved as one, their tips glowing with elemental power, tracing lines of light that danced across the floor. A circle, vast and perfect, bloomed into being, its circumference spanning the entire width of the chamber, as if drawn by some unseen compass. Within this circle, 2 interlocking triangles took shape, their lines sharp and precise, forming a 6-pointed star that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The very air crackled with power, and the stones beneath their feet seemed to vibrate in sympathy with the growing hum of the ritual. Once the 4 high mages had completed their primary sigil work around the center of the room, they moved with focused intensity towards the chamber's corners. Their staffs, held low, traced glowing sigils upon the ancient stone floor as they moved, each stroke deliberate and precise. The lines of power they drew slowly shimmered into existence. A vibrant green for Isando, a deep red for Asmund, a soft purple for Geldrid, and Rheneas's sigils glowing a cool blue as they all spread out, creating a growing distance. The High Mage Geldrid, upon finishing his part of the necessary sigils with a speed born of desperation, moved with a quiet urgency towards the very epicenter of the room where the one called Master stood waiting. Geldrid leaned in just close enough to speak softly into his ear, his voice a hushed plea against the encroaching shadow of the Order of Purity.
Master, Father,
Geldrid began, his voice trembling slightly.
We do not have to do this. Surely there must be other ways. There must be another way to accomplish what you came here to achieve without going through with this. This is madness. Please. I will do anything that you ask. Anything else. But not this. Please, not this.
The one called Master regarded his son, his eyes filled with a sorrow that mirrored the young mage's own.
"Were there another way, Mage Geldred?"
he replied, his voice heavy with regret.
"I can assure you with absolute certainty I would have chosen it, as none would ever wish to place upon one they love the burden for which I now beseech you to carry. Alas, however, time and the will of the world have brought me to this final, culminating decision, from which there is no other course. My son,"
Master continued, his gaze softening with immense affection,
"you have done all that I have ever asked, and have become more than I could ever have hoped. I see in you the pride that I wished to feel throughout all the centuries of my toiling in a troubled world, and yet never actually achieved. For all the guilt and shame, and all the terrible atrocities and calamities I have, incidentally and unmeaningly, brought onto this world, though ever from a place of the best intentions, my actions have in the end been nothing short of disastrous. Yet, within all of this, I have at the very least succeeded in the creation of one thing for which I can, and always shall be, proud, and that is you, my son."
His voice grew thick with emotion.
"Now please, at this final hour, grant me one more request, knowing that the burden of it will weigh heavier on you than any I have ever placed upon your shoulders. I can, at the very least, promise you this. There will be no more requests coming from me, forthwith, should you find it within yourself to carry out this final, most difficult task."
He paused then, and his gaze, though shadowed by the deep cowl, held a keen intensity that seemed to pierce the very stones of the chamber.
"Know this,"
He said, his voice now imbued with a solemn weight,
"that in passing through this final eye of the storm, as it were, we shall indeed be born anew into a world beyond this, a virgin soil where perhaps the errors of this age may yet be remedied. Yet deem not this endeavor solely for the frail hope of my own redemption. Nay,
his voice deepened, resonant with a burden of ages.
it is for mankind, for the very essence of their being and the high destiny for which they were wrought, that this final act shall serve as the last ember of hope against the encroaching darkness. For I have seen through, even unto the bitter end, the path upon which they now tread, a path that leads only to the ruin of themselves and all they might have been, all that they should have been. It is for their sake, for the unwritten future that lies beyond this perilous passage, that I seek to expiate the manifold sins of my long stewardship, the unforgivable failures of my guidance, wherein my best intents have served only to lead mankind to its ruin, and ultimately its demise."
A shadow of profound sorrow then fell across his unseen countenance.
"Sadly,"
He continued, his voice now tinged with a deep regret,
"as this rite is designed, I will not recall anything of this life, nor of you, my son, as regrettable as it is. Still, though, on some deep, unconscious level, the part of me that came to this world knowing from birth the precise task for which I was sent, that part of me will at least, I think, greet you with some semblance of familiarity, should our paths ever cross. Who and what I may be reborn into, I cannot say. I am, however, confident that I would do my best to be for that world what I have failed to be for this one. So please then,
a note of supplication entered his voice,
grant me this one, and perhaps final, chance for the redemption of my soul, my core, my very being, and, most importantly, for the final chance at redemption for mankind itself."
The hushed intensity of their exchange was shattered by a sudden, violent upheaval. The massive stone doors, which, only moments ago, had groaned open with such reluctance, were now flung inward with a deafening crash, splintering against the ancient walls. Through the breach surged a formidable company. At the forefront strode 9 figures clad in gleaming steel, descendants of the ancient Knights Templar, their eyes burning with righteous fury. To either side of this vanguard marched 2 of the brown-skinned priests, their dark eyes alight with an unnatural power. Behind the knights came another wave of 9. Templar, descendants, their swords already drawn and glinting in the ethereal torchlight cast by Asmund's levitating flames. And finally, bringing up the rear, were 7 more of the mysterious priests. An air of palpable menace seemed to ripple in their wake, a subtle shift in the very atmosphere of the chamber. For those attuned to the currents of magic, or those whose senses were keenly honed, there was a sense of something more accompanying them, an almost translucent darkness that clung to their forms, less seen than felt. It was a presence, heavy and cold, that hinted at bestial shapes lurking just beyond the threshold of ordinary sight. If one's gaze lingered and the mind's eye strained, fleeting glimpses of smoky, dark forms, the sinuous curve of a wolf's back, the thrashing tail of some great reptile, could be perceived within the shifting gloom. This ethereal mist, a silent army of nature's fury subtly leashed to their will, cloaked their entry in an aura of profound and unsettling power, a promise of the wild unleashed. Their hands moved in subtle, unsettling gestures, as if even now they were subtly commanding the unseen forces that moved with them. Their sudden arrival cut the master's words short. Before Geldrid could offer a reply, one of the leading priests stepped forward, his voice resonating with an unnatural authority that filled the chamber.
"We, the high priests of the Order of Purity,"
he declared, his gaze fixed upon the figure standing in the center of the glowing sigils.
"hereby charge thee, Myrdin, Wilt, also known as the elusive Merlin, the self-proclaimed shepherd of mankind, with crimes against the natural order, crimes against humanity, and crimes against divinity. More specifically, we charge you with inciting the 100 Years' War, the Wars of the Roses, and the Italian Wars. We charge you with causing the Black Death, initiating the Great Famine of 1315, and invoking the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius of 472, along with the subsequent and untimely eruption of Mount Etna in 1169, and the subsequent tsunami that ensued, causing untold devastation and costing countless innocent lives. We charge you with orchestrating the downfall of our esteemed ancestral lord, Acre. We charge you with orchestrating the very downfall of our forefathers' holy order, along with the failure of their just and righteous cause, handed down them by the very voice of God himself. That cause having been divinely ordained as the Holy Crusades. Lastly, we, the high priests of the Order of Purity, charge you with high heresy, supernatural interference, and for being an ungodly expression, and a blight upon this very earth.
The high priest's voice held no hint of negotiation, only the cold certainty of judgment.
Do not trouble yourself with any form of refuge, as no plea is needed. We, the Order of Purity, have already found you guilty, and for your crimes. The sentence is death. Resist us, and we will ensure your death is as painful and as long as your plague upon this earth has been throughout these many long centuries of your unnatural life here. Cooperate, however, and perhaps we shall issue unto you a mercifully quick and relatively painless death.
He gestured around the ancient chamber with disdain.
Either way, today and in this place, whatever this blasphemous chamber that you've led us to may be, in this God-forsaken land of perverse teachings, misguided fools, and unchecked heresy, This will be your pyre, your execution chamber, and the place where your defiled epitaph shall be etched for all time, as perverse and twisted as you yourself."
The one called Master, now revealed as Mirrodin Wilt, turned swiftly to Geldrid, his eyes blazing with a desperate urgency.
"Now, my son."
His voice, moments before filled with sorrowful resignation, suddenly swelled, growing to a sonorous thunder that reverberated through the stone chamber, an almost deafening roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient structure.
"Do it now."
So unnatural was the power in his voice that the intruders, the Order of Purity, cried out, their hands flying to their ears. Several stumbled, losing their footing as if the very equilibrium within them had been shattered. Merlin's intent was clear: to buy a few precious moments for the other 4 members of his all but extinct and long-forgotten order. With a sudden, heart-wrenching cry, a sound that held both unbearable pain and a desperate sob, Geldrid drew from beneath his grey robes a small dagger, approximately 9 inches in length. It was hewn from a finely polished black stone, a type that emitted a subtle, inner luminescence, something akin to a faint green phosphorescent glow, one that shimmered around the edges when viewed from a certain angle. The dagger drawn, Geldrid uttered one short, final incantation, his voice choked with grief before looking into his father's eyes one last time. Then, with a swift, agonizing motion, he plunged the black blade deep into Mirrodin's chest. Mirrodin's body fell, the weight of mortality claiming him. Geldrid, with a speed born of love and despair, dropped to his knees, catching his father before he struck the cold stone floor. Sobbing uncontrollably, his hands trembling as he closed his father's sightless eyes, he watched in stunned disbelief as the very form of his father began to twist and misfigure, as if time and space themselves were folding and reshaping him. The dimensionality of what had been Mirrodin's body seemed to unravel, becoming like overlapping sheets of polygonal paper, shifting and merging. The transformation was swift, almost too quick to perceive. Within the span of a few heartbeats, Geldrid found nestled in the palm of his hands a small, unassuming sphere. It appeared to be made of glass or some similar substance. Neither entirely transparent nor fully opaque, but rather a translucent orb with a soft, hazy interior that obscured any clear view, yet hinted at depths unseen. Knowing the immense power he now held, the potential of what it could become, and the final, terrible step that remained, Geldrid rose to his feet, his voice ringing with a defiant cry that echoed through the chamber.
"Finally!"
He cried out to the intruders, his voice thick with grief and rage.
"At the end of all things, you have failed. All of you wretched, foul creatures. You who would dare to call yourselves men. You who would dare accuse my father of being the monster that you, yourselves, actually are. The essence of the very evil that you claim to fight. I say unto you, this day, through all of your endless efforts and your maniacal pursuit, bent solely on destruction, you have failed,"
Geldrid declared, his voice heavy with reluctant triumph, as the sphere he now held in his hands began to pulse softly. Within his upturned palms, he now held it high above his head. Then a stillness fell, broken only by Geldrid's next pronouncement, his voice now carrying a note of solemn finality.
"The sacred rite is now complete."
It was then, as the echoes of Geldrid's words still hung in the magically charged air, that a disquieting realization began to dawn upon the 27 members of the Order of Purity. The chamber, which they had believed to hold but two figures engaged in a grim act, now revealed a truth concealed by enchantments woven with subtle skill. From the shadowed corners where they had stood, seemingly unregarded, three figures shed the veils of their concealment. Isando, Asmund, and Rheneas stepped forth, their staffs now held aloft, glowing with barely suppressed power as the final lines of the intricate sigil etched upon the floor beneath their feet shimmered with completion. The realization struck the assembled order with the force of a physical blow. These three mages had been present throughout, their arcane craft subtly weaving the final threads of the ritual, while the exchange between Merlin and Geldrid unfolded. A murmur of shocked disbelief rippled through their ranks, a dawning comprehension that the witnessed sacrifice had been but one part of a larger, concealed design. Geldrid, his eyes now fixed upon the stunned faces of the encroaching order, cradled the softly glowing sphere above his head, preparing for the final enactment.
Now then,
he declared, his voice ringing with a newfound power.
my three fellow mages, my brothers, brace yourselves.
In that instant, with the sphere held loftily above his head, his father now transformed, Geldrid began to incant. The sound that poured from him was a testament to his being, a profound and resonant cry, the loudest note his failing will could achieve.
Stop him!
Roared the same dark-skinned priest who had delivered Merlin's condemnation.
Whatever he is about to do, it cannot be allowed. Stop him! Now!
At that instant, three of the foremost knights, having regained their composure, drew their swords and lunged forward, thrusting their cold steel into Geldrid's chest, just as he had anticipated, and in that terrible moment, exactly as he had intended. As the knights withdrew their blades, allowing time for the others of their order to finish recovering, having just been assailed by the sonorous wave that the Archmage Merlin unleashed upon them only moments ago. Geldrid's blood, the very blood he had inherited from his father Merlin, now draining from him as though drawn from Merlin himself, began to fall onto the translucent sphere, the very sphere that had once been Myrdin Wilt. Prologue 2. The instant Geldrid's blood, the very essence inherited from Myrdin, touched the translucent sphere that had been his father, a wave of pure, untamed energy erupted outwards. It wasn't a visible surge of light, but rather a concussive force, like an invisible fist slamming into the very air. Before the sound could even register, a low, grinding groan emanated from the very stones of the chamber, a vibration that resonated deep in the bones of all present, as if the mountain's heart was breaking under an impossible strain. Mortar, ancient and dry, turned to dust between the massive granite blocks. Then, with a cataclysmic roar that was felt before it was heard, the walls of the chamber did not simply break. They disintegrated, exploding outwards in a storm of stone shrapnel that was hurled into the surrounding, concealed forest. The vaulted stone ceiling above them was peeled away, its massive slabs torn from their moorings and vanishing into the night as if consumed by the void, revealing the cold, distant stars. In an instant, the sacred enclosed space was reduced to little more than the sigil-etched flagstones upon which they stood, surrounded by the shattered stumps of a few support pillars. And at the heart of this physical devastation was a sound, impossibly loud, a cosmic boom that seemed to tear at the fabric of existence itself. This was not mere noise, but a ripple in reality, a shockwave of pure creation that slammed into everyone and everything within a 100-mile radius. For those nearest, within the ruined remnants of the ancient chamber, the effect was immediate and violent. The 27 members of the Order of Purity, unprotected and caught completely unaware, were subjected to the full, brutal brunt of the force. It was a scene of pure, uncontrolled chaos. The knights closest to the epicenter were flung head over heels, their bodies spinning like discarded toys in a tempest, armor shrieking against the unseen force. One was hurled violently into the jagged stump of a shattered pillar, the crack of his helm against stone, sharp and sickeningly final. Another, a priest, was caught in an updraft of pulverized rock and debris, thrown skyward into the newly exposed night, before crashing back to the earth in a heap of dark robes. Swords were ripped from their hands, arcing like fallen comets through the air to land hundreds of yards away in the dark forest. Their righteous fury now just silent, lost steel. Bodies tumbled and collided, their cries of outrage turning to gasps of shock and pain. Only the four mages, their feet anchored to the flagstones by charms of binding woven in anticipation of this moment, stood their ground. They remained immovable amidst the maelstrom, their robes whipping violently about them as they braced against the invisible tide. From the heart of the tumbling disarray, the lead, dark-skinned priest struggled to push himself up, his hood thrown back to reveal a face etched with disbelief and terror. He roared,
"What blasphemy is this? What have you done, foul sorcerers?"
His voice was abruptly swallowed by a deafening silence, a void that descended as suddenly as the boom had struck, replaced only by a high-pitched, persistent ringing that clawed at their eardrums. Then, as swiftly as it had erupted, the force reversed. It was as if the universe itself had exhaled and was now drawing breath again. A palpable vacuum, a cosmic inhalation, began to pull everything within the 100-mile radius inexorably towards the glowing sphere held in Geldrid's bloodied hands. The four wizards, however, though staggered by the initial blast, held their ground with a grim understanding etched on their faces. They had anticipated this final, violent act of creation. Asmund, Isondo, and Rheneas braced themselves, their staffs planted firmly, while Geldrid, still kneeling amidst the chaos, held the pulsating sphere aloft, the catalyst of a world yet unborn. For the scattered members of the Order of Purity, there was no such understanding, only a horrifying new torment. Most were still dazed, their minds a maelstrom of ringing silence and shattered equilibrium, their perception of up and down hopelessly lost. The pull began not as a force to be fought, but as a silent, irresistible tide. A knight, trying to push himself onto his elbows, found his legs lifting from the ground. A priest, still unconscious, began to slide across the broken flagstones as if dragged by an unseen hand. Panic, raw and mindless, finally cut through their disorientation. Their struggles were not a coordinated defense, but the futile, instinctual spasms of drowning men. Fingers clawed uselessly at the slick stone, finding no purchase. Guttural cries of pure terror replaced their earlier righteous fury as they were lifted from the ground, their bodies tumbling and contorting in the invisible current as they were sucked, one by one, into the swirling light emanating from the sphere. The vacuum intensified, its reach extending beyond the confines of the chamber. The very air seemed to thin as it rushed inwards. Outside, The effect was even more profound. Trees buckled and were ripped from the earth, their roots tearing through the soil as they were drawn towards the unseen center. Rocks, large and small, tumbled across the landscape, joining the relentless inward flow. Animals, caught in the invisible current, howled in confusion and fear as they were lifted into the sky, becoming part of the spiraling vortex. And along with the flora and fauna, people too were caught in the pull. Farmers in their fields, travelers on roads, villagers within their homes. All were lifted against their will, their screams lost in the roar of the implosion as they spiraled towards the point where the chamber had once stood. Even the waters of nearby streams and lakes surged upwards, forming towering columns that snaked towards the epicenter. The very essence of the land and all life within 100 miles was being pulled, atom by atom, into the glowing sphere, still cradled in Geldred's palms. Amidst the deafening roar of this implosion, as splintered trees and great clods of earth spiraled past them in the swirling tempest, the three mages shouted their final allegiances over the din, their voices strained with effort and conviction. Isondo, his green eyes blazing with fierce respect, roared above the gale.
His heart was unwavering, and so too shall be my own. For Merlin.
With that final shouted tribute to Merlin, he released his grip on his staff, allowing the implacable pull to take him. Asmund, the red light of his staff, casting harsh, dancing shadows on his grim face, turned his gaze to Geldred and bellowed,
"You are your father's son, Geldred. I will follow you."
He too relinquished his hold. His form immediately swept into the swirling vortex. Rheneas, his blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears not of sorrow, but of profound honor, cried out his final words to the howling chaos.
"For the hope of what might be, my brothers."
With a final sorrowful glance at the spot where Geldred knelt, he too let go, joining his companions and allowing the spiraling vortex of energy to pull him into the epicenter. Finally, only Geldred remained, kneeling amidst the swirling vortex of wind and energy, the translucent sphere cradled in his bloodied palms. The violent currents tugged at his cloak and hair, yet his gaze was fixed downwards upon the sphere that held the essence of his father. His lifeblood continued to seep from the wounds in his chest, staining his hands and the surface of the orb, a final offering. A faint, bittersweet smile touched his lips. Looking down at the sphere, his voice, though weak and almost lost in the howling wind, carried a note of profound love and respect.
Father, thank you for all that you have given, both to myself and to the chosen few who shall now remain. Hopefully, someday, they will discover within themselves all that they were truly intended to be, and for me to have been bestowed with the unyielding trust that you have placed in me, along with the forthcoming responsibility I shall now carry. I am honored. Truly, I am honored to have been your son.
With a final, gentle sigh, Geldred released the subtle weave of magic that had kept him grounded and allowed the irresistible force to draw him, along with the sphere held in his palms, into its heart. In that instant, as Geldred vanished within the sphere, the turbulent winds abruptly ceased. The roaring vortex vanished, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. And then, the sphere itself was gone, disappearing from sight and all earthly detection, becoming a pocket dimension, inaccessible from the world it had left behind. The portal was closed. The creation was complete. And thus was wrought a new world, a realm born solely upon the hope of second chances, and perhaps for the final reckoning of humankind. Blackness, a profound, absolute void, devoid of sensation, time, or place. Then a sudden jolt. Consciousness flickered like a nascent flame in a vast darkness. A gasp, a disoriented inhale of air that felt thick and strangely sweet. A rough texture beneath backs. The gritty feel of sand, or something akin to it. A man clad in steel, heavy and unfamiliar, pushed himself up. His eyes snapped open, wide with a primal confusion. His gauntleted hands finding purchase on the alien soil. He scanned the faces of the others rising around him, all clad in the same familiar steel. A flicker of recognition, not of memory, but of shared appearance, sparked within the void of his mind. "Who?" he rasped, his voice rough and unused. He looked at the blank stares of his companions.
Who am I? Do any of you? Do you know me? What is this place? And how did we come to be here?
A chorus of confused murmurs rippled through the assembled knights. Heads shook, eyes wide with the same terrifying emptiness. One spoke, his voice filled with a raw fear.
I do not know. I know that I am a man, yet I cannot recall who I was before this very moment.
Another echoed,
This place, this land. I cannot say how I know this, but somehow I know, deep down, that it is unnatural.
The leading knight's gaze hardened with a sudden instinct for survival.
We are all garbed as one. We rise together as one in this unknown place. Surely that cannot be a mere coincidence. Whatever has befallen us, stripping us of our very selves, it is clear that we are under threat. Look at those others.
He gestured towards the silent, robed figures.
They are different. All of them. Their attire alone confirms this. It speaks of something secular, something perverse. I trust them not. We, those of us all clad in this warrior mail, this armor, we must leave. Now! Before whatever fell craft that has befallen us decides to strike again. Quickly, we must now find our own way, far from this place, and far away from these strangers. Perhaps, in time, we shall come to remember who we are and whence we hail. For now, however, we are brethren of steel. Henceforth, we shall find our way together.
Without further hesitation, he turned and began to move towards a dense line of strangely hued trees. One by one, the other 17 knights followed, their movements driven by a primal need to escape the unsettling mystery of their awakening. Their path, chosen by an instinct they did not understand, led them northwest, towards a distant, forbidding horizon. There, impossibly far away, jagged peaks, like the broken teeth of some colossal subterranean beast, clawed at a sky tainted with an unnatural, restless light. A strange, luminescent mist, perhaps the exhalation of vast, unseen furnaces deep within the earth, clung to the base of these mountains. Above this vaporous veil, the upper atmosphere itself seemed to writhe with a disquieting energy, accented with light, vibrant reds, shot through with seductive, coiling sinews of oranges and deep yellows, and smudged with the light. distant hints of fiery, smoky plumes rising steadily against the alien sky. A silent, ominous beckoning towards a realm of intense heat and untamed, primordial power. Moments after the last armored figure was swallowed by the foliage, the 9 dark-skinned priests began to stir. But for them, consciousness returned not as a void, but as a slow, dawning horror. They remembered everything: the pursuit, the ritual, the impossible boom. And through swimming vision, they saw the 4 mages standing nearby, seemingly unharmed. A wave of bitter resentment washed over their leader. He opened his mouth to unleash a torrent of accusations, but only a dry, rasping sound escaped. Confusion, then terror, flickered in his dark eyes. He tried again, straining his throat, but no words came. A strangled gasp was the only result. Frantic, he clutched at his throat as the other priests, seeing his silent scream, did the same, their own mouths moving to no effect. A dawning shared horror passed between them. Their voices, their primary means of command, had been stolen. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded the lead priest's mind. To his shattered senses and ingrained paranoia, this could not be a mere consequence. It had to be a design. The loss of his voice felt like a cage, deliberately sprung. In the chaos of his thoughts, a singular, terrible conclusion took root. A figment of deduction born from fear. This was a trap. A final, damning piece of the heretic's grand design, planned from the very beginning. A desperate imperative burned through him. They had to escape. Suddenly, he felt a jolt, a strange resonance in his mind. He looked up, locking eyes with the priest nearest to him, who gave a subtle nod, a flicker of understanding in his dark gaze. Then another priest and another offered the same silent acknowledgement. A wave of comprehension washed over the lead priest. They could hear him, not with their ears, but within the very core of their thoughts. A silent internal communication had been established in their shared trauma. He focused his intent, a clear directive echoing in their minds. Southeast. The trees. We must find refuge. His gaze fixed on the horizon, towards a line of colossal trees in the southeast. These were unlike any trees they had ever seen. Their massive trunks stretched towards the heavens, dwarfing any earthly redwood. A faint, ethereal green radiance emanated from their bark, and a subtle shimmer of light, like countless tiny sparkles, danced within their foliage. They seemed to sway with a deliberate grace, an almost sentient movement that hinted at a profound, hidden life. Geldrid stood upon the soft, sandy soil of the clearing, his own senses, like those of his 3 companions, engaged in a profound and silent communion with the new reality. Their passage had been a willing one. Their minds braced for the transition, yet even they were not untouched. The very fabric of their being had been rewoven by the rite, their souls now tuned to the vibrant, thrumming frequency of the new world. Theirs was not the stillness of shock, but of willed introspection, a necessary pause to find their center. It was from this state of focused alignment that Geldrid watched the schism complete itself. In that very moment, as if cued by some unseen hand of fate, the 9 priests suddenly turned as one. Their departure was not a panicked flight, but a deliberate, measured retreat, carrying the heavy weight of their newfound anger and a calculating caution as they set a course towards a promise on the far southeastern horizon. A distant forest of such colossal, luminous trees that its ethereal green pulse was visible even across the vast leagues. At that same moment, Geldred's keen eyes caught the last flicker of movement far to the northwest. Having traversed the initial forest, the knights had emerged onto the base of a long, sweeping ridge. He could now see their determined silhouetted forms making their way up the incline, briefly visible against the strange, fiery glow of the distant horizon. For a long, profound moment, Geldred stood as the fulcrum between two diverging fates. The schism was complete. Two seeds of a fallen order, now planted in the fertile, magical soil of this new world, destined to grow into two very different and perhaps one day, very terrible things. Now, Geldred's senses drank in the very essence of this world. The colors of the strange flora were breathtakingly deep and rich, possessing an inner luminescence. The very air had a misty shimmer, as if woven with threads of pure magic. In the distance, he could almost hear the water, a low, resonant hum that seemed to sing of the world's creation, its surface catching the alien light with a soft, blue phosphorescence. Beneath his feet, the ground thrummed with a deep, harmonious vibration, and the air whispered secrets just beyond the threshold of hearing, tantalizing his senses. Here and there, he saw clusters of striking blue crystals. These formations were composed of sharp, obelisk-like structures, ranging in size, with individual crystals easily spanning 10 to 20 inches in width and reaching significant heights. Their color was a radiant cerulean blue, and within their translucent depths, a constant, pulsing light flickered and danced, reminiscent of miniature lightning strikes trapped within the crystalline form. This inner energy was so potent that the crystals cast a noticeable glow upon the surrounding landscape, even in the daylight. They seemed to hum with a palpable power, a fundamental energy that permeated the very air. It was as if these crystalline structures were the lifeblood of this world itself, a network of power that pulsed beneath the surface, giving vitality to all that existed. Geldred felt it all, the deep, pervasive magic, the subtle consciousness that permeated every rock, every blade of the strangely luminous grass. This world was alive, a world born of magic, and he was the only one present who truly understood its profound and potent nature. Asmund spoke, his voice carrying the weight of finality.
Well, then, it is done.
Geldred, his gaze still lingering on his bloodied palms, looked up. As he did, the other mages, their attention now fully fixed upon him, noticed the change. The voice that answered Asmund was not the one they had known. It was deeper, more resonant, carrying a weight that seemed to echo the very thrumming of the new world around them.
Yes, Brother Asmund.
Geldred replied, a soft sorrow still in his eyes, though now overlaid with a profound, weary calm.
Indeed, it is done.
Rheneas took a half step back, his own eyes wide with awe.
By the heavens, Geldred, your voice, you are changed more than I could have imagined.
His gaze drifted to Geldred's chest, where the soft, otherworldly light pulsed with a steady, rhythmic cadence.
And your chest?
Asmund, his face a mask of grim understanding, nodded slowly.
So this is what it looks like. I had considered different outcomes, but never in my wildest imaginings was it like this. You're practically glowing.
The last was said not with humor, but with a deep, humbling reverence.
My brother,
He continued, his voice low with the gravity of what he knew.
To say that I am humbled by what you have done this day, and by the weight you will now carry for the rest of your existence. I find myself at a loss for words.
Isondo, ever the most concerned, stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the light.
Brother, pray tell, does it hurt, that which you now bear inside you? It seems to light up the very air. What pain must you endure for this burden?
Geldred looked at each of his companions, his brethren, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. He placed a hand over the light in his chest.
It is not a pain of the flesh, my brothers. It is a connection, a profound, overwhelming awareness of everything. I can feel the life in the soil beneath my feet, the thirst of a sapling a league away, the fear of a rabbit in its burrow. It is the weight of an entire world's nascent consciousness, a responsibility I feel I am not yet worthy to bear, not as my father might have.
He took a deep breath, the light in his chest seeming to brighten with his resolve.
But it is also the greatest gift that could ever have been bestowed, and so I will carry this living nexus with all the honor, duty, and resolve I can muster.
Isondo, his brow furrowed with concern, asked,
So then, what shall we do now, my brothers?
Rheneas replied, his voice resolute.
I feel we could do nothing less than to follow through with the very purpose of our order, to try and rebirth it anew within this world. After all, ultimately Merlin did prophesy his return to this world. I believe it only fitting then that, should he return, nay, when he returns, the establishment of all he worked for in the realm of earth should already be present and waiting here for him in the very world, born of his own sacrifice.
A shadow of pain crossed Geldred's face.
He did indeed prophesy his return, but the question remains, will we even recognize him when he comes? And furthermore, should he return, will there truly be anything left of him? The expression of who he was as Merlin the man. Will any of that remain? Will he still hold within him anything that once was my father?
Asmund stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Geldred's shoulder.
My brother Geldred, take heart. Merlin will always be Merlin, no matter what form he may take on, or what world he may inhabit. Who and what he was, he still is, and therefore always will be. For one such as himself could not possibly be anything less.
Geldred offered a small, grateful nod.
Thank you, Brother Asmund, for your kind words, and thank you all for your continual support, for continuing to pledge your allegiance to the line of Merlin, despite having no further obligatory reason to remain or do so. Please know that if you choose to remain at my side, as it seems this world has chosen me to be its steward, I will ever seek and endeavor to be, for you all, what my father was for the Order back when we were many. I will do all within my power to restore our Order to its full strength and glory, and to guide this world towards the ultimate growth, development, and evolution of mankind. To see the seed planted within their very being blossom into the magnificence that my father foretold they were meant to achieve. A destiny that perhaps was lost in the old world.
He then turned, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks in the northeast.
To that end, my brothers, I believe our path lies to the far northeast. There is a region amongst those peaks that I can feel, a resonance within this world that calls to me as a place to begin anew, to rebuild.
Asmund stepped forward, a thoughtful expression on his face.
Aye, brother. Well, now that all is set, only one question remains.
Geldred turned, a questioning look in his eyes.
And what is that, my dear brother Asmund?
A small smile played on Asmund's lips.
What? Shall we call this world?
Geldred chuckled softly, a hint of his former self returning.
No need to ask, my brother, for Father had already informed me years prior, anticipating that this might become an eventuality of what this world would be meant to be called. He referred to it as Nox.
Chapter 1. Thresholds. In the 10th year of resurgence, the world of Nox was still a place of profound mystery, yet for the scattered descendants of Earth, it had become home. 10 years had passed since the lives they knew were inexplicably ripped away, since they found themselves deposited in this strange new land, forced to start over from scratch. The initial terror and destitution had slowly given way to a resilient, burgeoning society, a collection of villages and hamlets spread across the vast, fertile greenlands they had come to call Parth-Galen. This was a land of relative neutrality, a lush expanse of rolling fields and scattered woodlands that seemed intentionally designed to nurture them. Here, life was difficult. Yes, but rewarding in a way none had ever known. The very air, saturated with what the magically inclined would later call manicules, was invigorating. The days, they had calculated, stretched to nearly 36 hours under the light of a distant blue sun, and 4 moons of varying size and hue graced the night sky. Time itself seemed to move differently here. They aged more slowly, and even the most menial tasks felt imbued with a sense of purpose that had been absent in their old lives. Across Parth-Galen, villages had taken root, some mere hamlets of 20 or 30 souls, others growing into small, bustling towns. At the very center of this network, the focal point of their new civilization, was the village of Lærendor. By the subtle will of whatever force had brought them here, Lærendor had been blessed with a unique concentration of talent. Engineers, architects, and a leader of uncommon wisdom and foresight, Mayor Alaric, a man of distant aristocratic blood, whose calm authority had been instrumental in their survival from the first day. As such, Lærendor had become the model of what was possible in Nox. While other villages relied on basic carpentry and metallurgy, Lærendor boasted a sturdy 15-foot palisade wall, a clever watermill, its power harnessed to both turn the grindstones and feed the town's aqueducts. To foster unity and share the fruits of their separate discoveries, Mayor Alaric had established a quarterly gathering. Once every few months, the heads of the surrounding villages who were able to make the journey would travel to Lærendor with their entourages, bringing trade goods and new knowledge, tales of newly discovered medicinal herbs, warnings of toxic plants, or innovative techniques for weaving the magically resilient fibers of Noxian flora. It was a vital tradition that stitched their scattered communities together. It was on a Monday morning, after such a weekend of gathering and trade, that Lærendor's own rhythms resumed. The blue sun cast long, cool shadows as the day's hunting party, an essential component of the village's prosperity, moved with a practiced ease. An hour's trek from the village's western gate, their laughter and jests echoing softly in the morning stillness. There were 12 of them today, though there should have been 14. The absence of Genesidas and Delineus was noted not with anger, but with the weary, knowing sighs of men long accustomed to their shirking.
I tell you, Theron,
chuckled a burly man named Borin, shifting the lightweight skeletal frame of his quarry pack.
if Genesidas put half the effort into his duties as he does into charming the barmaid at the town square pub, we'd have a second village built by now.
A younger man with a quick smile replied, "And what would we do with a second village, Borin? We've barely enough gossip to fill this one." The quip earned a round of quiet laughter, which was immediately silenced by a single, upraised hand from the man at the front. He was Kaela, the party's leader, a man whose quiet competence and keen senses had earned him his position. Beside him, his second in command, a wiry man named Fendrel, whose skill in tracking was legendary among the villagers, was already on one knee, crumbling a piece of dark, rich soil between his fingers, his nostrils flaring as he tasted the air. The men in the back fell silent. 4 of them were the designated quarry carriers, their shoulders bearing the lightweight frames of their packs. The morning had already been fruitful. 3 of the packs were not empty, each carrying a plump rabbit analog. The creatures known in Nox as burrow looms, their faintly glowing fur now still, lashed securely to the wooden frame with the fine, yet incredibly strong twine that each hunter carried spooled at their hip. Another man carried a collapsed cylindrical bundle 7 feet in length, an ingeniously designed game cart. Designed like a massive hand truck, it rested on 2 sturdy wheels at its base, allowing the front to be lowered to the ground to act as a ramp for winching heavy quarry aboard. Each man wore a cushioned leather pulley harness slung over their shoulder, ready to be attached to the cart's front eyelets should they bring down a truly massive prize. They watched the captain's hands. He raised his right hand, palm forward, the universal signal for halt and silence. Then he pointed 2 fingers down towards Fendrel and the tracks at his feet, the sign for eyes down, assess. Fendrel leaned closer, his gaze sweeping over the disturbed earth, the broken twigs, the sheer size of the cloven hoof prints. He picked up a blade of grass, noting the fresh wetness of the dew that had been knocked from it. He sniffed the air again, then looked up at Kyle. He nodded once, sharply. He then held up one finger, drawing a large curving shape in the air with it, ending in an upward slash, the sign for the massive tusked boar analog they had been tracking since dawn. He then tapped his nose twice. Scent is fresh. Finally, he held his hand low to the ground and slowly raised it, the signal for proximity. Close, very close. A thrill, a potent mix of excitement and professional focus, passed through the party. A boar of this size, 4 or 5 times that of any they had known on Earth, meant a feast. It meant a night of music from the village lutes and drums, of dancing, of celebration. It meant a welcome reprieve from the daily toil, a gift to the entire community. Kale acknowledged Fendrel's assessment with a slight dip of his head. He gave the signal to spread out, a slow, outward sweep of his hands, and then pointed forward. The hunt was on in earnest. The men moved now with a predatory grace, their footsteps silent on the soft earth, their jokes and laughter replaced by the shared, unspoken language of the chase. They were no longer just villagers. They were providers, their purpose clear and immediate, their senses alive to the vibrant, dangerous, and beautiful world they now called home. What followed was an art form, a silent ballet of predation honed over a decade of survival in this new world. It was a synergy, born not just of practice, but of a deep, intuitive connection to the land itself. a gift of Nox to those who truly devoted themselves to its ways. The men melted into the undergrowth, becoming 12 separate shadows, moving with a single cohesive purpose. They did not speak, nor did they need to. A shared intuitive awareness settled over them, a knowing of each man's position and timing that transcended mere training. Fendril, ever the master of the unseen, paused to feel the gentle morning breeze against his cheek. It was not just wind. It was a current carrying information, scent, sound. He knew with an instinct that was now as natural as breathing, precisely how their own sense would travel, how far they needed to be to remain utterly undetectable. With a subtle gesture, he directed the two eastern flankers, Borin among them, on a wider arc, guiding them through a patch of dense ferns whose rustling would be dismissed by their prey as the natural sounds of the wood. The western flankers mirrored the movement without a signal, their own intuition telling them to adjust. For 10 slow, deliberate minutes, this silent encirclement continued. They moved with a patience that knew no limit, their devotion to the craft absolute. They were a closing net of silent, purposeful intent. 12 minutes passed. Finally, each man now in his predetermined position, they saw it. Through a break in the whisper-leaf trees, the boar analog was revealed. It was a magnificent, terrifying beast, larger than any Fendril had tracked before. It stood nearly as tall as a man at the shoulder, a mountain of bristled dark fur and rippling muscle, perhaps 1,500 pounds in weight. Its tusks, yellowed and thick as a man's arm, curved wickedly from a jaw powerful enough to snap bone. It rooted contentedly in the soft earth, completely unaware of the circle of death that had just, with masterful artistry, closed around it. Kael gave the signal. On the eastern and western edges of the flank, the two noisemakers raised their instruments of chaos, two heavy metal discs like small cymbals, each with a free-swinging striker inside. When shaken, they produced a crashing, discordant clang, a cataclysmic racket designed to shatter the peace and send any creature into a blind panic. They shook them. The sound was instantaneous and brutal. The great boar jerked its massive head up, its small eyes wide with terror. It snorted, a sound like a bellows, and spun, unsure of the threat's origin. The clanging came from two sides, a disorienting wall of noise. As intended, the boar's primal instinct took over. It fled from the noise, charging directly north. Waiting on the northern flank were two netcasters. As the boar thundered towards them, the first, a man named Rorik, stepped calmly from behind a tree. In his hands was a coiled bundle of rope, the net. Woven from the sinewy fibers of the ironweave tree, the net was light but incredibly strong. At 18 points along its perimeter were weighted balls of a rare, polarized metal, each small enough to be cupped in a man's palm. Rorik held the 20-foot tassel, his left hand gripping a smooth metallic sphere partway down its length, the neutralizer, which kept the weighted balls depolarized. With a powerful, practiced spin, he cast the net. It unfurled in a perfect wide circle, sailing through the air and landing squarely over the charging boar's head and shoulders. The moment the net made contact, Rorik shifted his grip. His left hand released the neutralizer, and his right hand closed around a second, identical sphere at the very end of the tassel, the activator. A faint, almost imperceptible current, too weak to be felt as a shock, shot through the conductive fibers of the net. Instantly, the 18 weighted balls on the net's edge had their natural, powerful magnetic polarity restored. With a series of violent thwacks, they snapped towards each other, the net constricting with incredible force. The boar's front legs were swept from under it, its massive body crashing to the earth in a tangle of rope and rage. The net's fibers themselves seemed to tighten, a light but firm compression that added to the beast's confusion and fury. It was a perfect cast, a perfect capture, but the hunt was not over. Before the boar could even begin to struggle to its feet, Kael and Fendrel were in motion. They exploded from their positions, their two-sided spears held ready. These were masterpieces of Larendoran craft, a shaft of naturally waxy, glossy wood, light yet durable, tipped on one end with a leaf-shaped head of keen Noxian metal, and on the other, a fire-hardened tapered wooden point. They charged head-on. Then, in perfect acrobatic unison, they sidestepped the boar's initial, flailing attempt to rise, flanking it on either side. In a single fluid motion, they flourished their spears, reversing them so the tapered wooden ends faced forward. They thrust as one, their timing impeccable, sinking the points deep into the powerful muscles of the boar's front shoulders. The beast roared in pain and fury, its charge halted before it could even begin. As it faltered, Kael and Fendrel pulled their spears free, and, in a second, impossibly swift and synchronized movement, thrust again. This time, their aim was absolute. 2 perfect, killing blows, each through an eye and deep into the brain. It was a legendary 2-thrust kill, a feat of skill and timing so rare that even the seasoned hunters who witnessed it were left momentarily awestruck. The great boar shuddered, a final ragged breath escaping its lungs, and then was still. Silence reigned for a moment, then erupted into cheers. The other hunters jogged forward, their faces alight with triumph and relief. "Captain! By the 4 moons, how do you two do it?" a young hunter exclaimed. Another slapped the shoulder of the youngest member of the party, a 17-year-old named Leon. "See that, Leon? A clean hunt. Not like your little dance with that sow last week." Leon's face flushed red as the others chuckled. "It charged unexpectedly," he protested, though a grin tugged at his lips. "Unexpectedly," Warren boomed, laughing. "Lad, you tripped on your own feet, flipped your spear the wrong way, dropped it, and fell square on your backside. If the captain hadn't been watching." "Aye," another chimed in. 25 feet at least. I've never seen a spear fly so true. Pinned the beast right through the throat, it did." "And where did it land, lads?" "Right on top of our Leon here." "Ha! Did it ever? We had to dig him out from under it." The men roared with good-natured laughter, the memory of Leon wiggling out from under the dead sow, covered in dirt and indignation, still fresh. Fendrel, ever the mentor, clapped Leon on the back. "Pay them no mind, boy. Last week was a hard lesson in humility. This week, you watched the masters. Soon enough, you'll be there." Kael simply offered Leon a rare small smile and a single approving nod, a gesture that meant more to the young hunter than 1,000 words of praise. With the celebration done, the hard work began. The 12 men, using their combined strength and the ingenious design of their collapsible cart, tilted it to form a ramp. They expertly trussed the massive boar, and using their leather pulley harnesses and the high tensile rope, began the arduous task of winching the massive carcass onto the cart. It was a grueling effort, their muscles straining, but they worked as one, their grunts and heaves a rhythm of shared purpose. Finally, with the 3 captured burrow looms already secured on the quarry packs, and the great boar lashed to the cart. They began their triumphant journey home. Their spirits were high, their voices once again raised in jokes and song, their minds already on the feast to come, and the hero's welcome they would receive. It was a good day's work, a perfect hunt, and another day of life, full and gratifying, in the world of Nox. In the cool, pre-midday quiet of the town square pub, a young man with a lean, well-defined physique leaned against the polished wooden bar, a picture of practiced nonchalance. There was an easy confidence in his posture, a subtle arrogance in the handsome lines of his face. His half-brother slouched in a shadowed corner, idly tossing a carved wooden die against the wall, his expression one of weary boredom. A young woman with a kind but tired face, the barmaid Ilara, wiped down a nearby table, her movements efficient and pointedly ignoring the man at the bar. He watched her for a moment before speaking, his voice a smooth, charming tenor.
A fine morning, is it not, Ilara? Almost as fine as the company.
She didn't look up.
If I'm not mistaken, Genesis, today is Monday.
And so it is,
he replied with a theatrical sigh.
The first of another 5 glorious days of toil. What is your point?
Doesn't that mean you were meant to be with a hunting party?
She asked, her voice even without accusation but heavy with implication. He scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand.
Oh, I'm sure our splendid hunters will succeed just fine without me, as they always do. Heavens know how important such a task is to everyone else. Far be it from me to impede their efforts, menial and insignificant as I seem to be in the eyes of everyone, including you.
The last words were a soft, manipulative barb, an attempt to turn her disapproval into an opening for his advances. She finally stopped her work and looked at him, her gaze clear and steady.
These menial people with their insignificant tasks will feed this entire village tonight, Genesidus. They accomplish more before the sun is high than you have in all the years I've known you.
Pfft, he retorted, a dashing but empty smile playing on his lips.
That's only because you lack the vision to see the potential within one, such as myself. I am an expression of dormant greatness, my dear, merely waiting for the right moment to make my mark upon this world. And when I do, it will be so immense as to eclipse all of the meaningless accomplishments of these rock scrapers.
Ilara sighed, picking up her cleaning cloth.
Your greatness will have to wait then. Unlike you, I actually take my responsibilities seriously, and I have much to get done before the men start pouring in today.
Delineus, from his corner, let out a quiet snort of amusement, earning a sharp glare from his brother. Genesidus's charm faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of irritation.
Fine. I shall take my leave of you. My presence is clearly so unwanted by some.
He pushed himself off the bar and started for the door, pausing to look back at her.
But remember, Ilara, an offer like the one I make, a life of adventure free from all this nothingness, is the kind that comes but once in a lifetime. It may not be good forever.
She simply turned her back and continued her work. With a final frustrated sigh, Genesidus strode out into the bright morning, Delineus trailing behind him like a shadow. They began a meandering stroll through the bustling heart of Lerendor. Hard-working villagers, their faces set with purpose, offered them curt nods or outright scoffs as they passed. The rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel echoed from the blacksmith's forge. The scent of baking bread wafted from the communal kitchen. The rhythmic groan and churn of the great watermill on the river. Its power a constant thrum, felt even within the walls. They passed the granary, where a group of men, Scrupulon among them, were hauling heavy sacks of sun-kissed grain.
Hey, Scrupulon,
Genesidas called out with a mocking grin.
Don't strain yourself. You wouldn't want to miss your nap.
Scrupulon, a lean man who loathed the brute labor of the granary, paused and looked over at Genesidas. A flicker of shared mischief danced in his eyes. He gave his friend a slow, knowing smile before turning back to his task with an exaggerated sigh of mock suffering, as if to say, "You and I both know this is beneath us." Their path took them past the communal laundry, where women and older children worked in organized teams, and past the terraced gardens on the village's northeastern slopes, where every patch of sunlit earth was meticulously cultivated. It was a world of purpose, a world of contribution, and to Genesidas, it was a prison of mediocrity. As they neared the infirmary, a simple but clean longhouse, Genesidas suddenly stopped. Delineus, lost in his own thoughts, walked a few paces ahead before realizing he was alone. He turned back to see his brother standing perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the infirmary's entrance. A breeze had parted the two heavy cloth flaps that served as its door, revealing a scene within.
"Brother,"
Delineus asked,
"what are we stopping for?"
Genesidas didn't respond. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cold focus. Delineus followed his gaze and saw it. The back of a young boy, perhaps 9 or 10, with olive skin and a head of jet-black curls. The boy was kneeling beside the cot of an elderly woman, his small hand gently supporting the back of her neck, while his other applied a salve to a grievously wounded leg. Even from a distance, the boy's posture exuded a profound sense of kindness and gentle compassion. A flicker of something dark and ugly passed through Genesidas' eyes.
"Brother, what is it?"
Delineus pressed, a note of unease in his voice. Genesidas finally broke his stare and turned away, resuming his walk as if nothing had happened.
Nothing,
he said, his voice flat.
I see absolutely nothing.
Delineus was taken aback.
"What do you mean, nothing? You were staring as if you'd seen a ghost."
Genesidas let out a short, bitter laugh.
Forget it, brother. It seems I am the only one in this village who can see with clear eyes.
He gestured vaguely back towards the infirmary.
They all look at that boy, as if they're looking into the sun itself. But I see nothing, nothing compared to what I am. And yet, they love and coddle him.
They walked on in silence for a time, eventually reaching a small rise at the edge of the village that overlooked the vast rolling greenlands of Parth Galen. Genesidas stopped and stared out at the world, his hands clenched into fists.
Do I not deserve more, brother?
He asked, his voice low and intense.
Do we not deserve more? I mean, look at this place. Look at it. It's vast. It's lush. It has so much to offer. And yet, here we are, expected to scrape a meaningless, unfulfilling life off the rocks. And for what? All just so we can wake up again tomorrow and get more of the same.
Delineus sighed, a familiar weariness in his voice.
And what else is there to do, brother? We are here. This is all there is. Let's just make the best of what we have.
Genesidas turned to him, and for the first time, Delineus saw not just resentment in his brother's eyes, but a cold, burning ambition that was truly terrifying.
What we have,
Genesidas said, his voice suddenly menacing,
is not enough. Not for me.
The Explorers Guild team, led by the veteran pathfinder Lorien, had pushed farther southwest than any expedition prior. Their 2-month journey had brought them to the edge of an uncharted forest, a place where the vibrant green of Parthgailen seemed to surrender to a deeper, more somber shade. From a distance, it had appeared unremarkable, a dense but otherwise normal woodland. But as they drew near, a profound silence fell, the familiar sounds of the plains fading as if swallowed by an invisible wall. The air grew cool, and the light of the blue sun seemed to dim, unable to penetrate the thick, blackish-green canopy that lay before them, a strange, external camouflage that belied the alien nature of what lay within. One member of the party, a man named Reese, felt a coldness coiling in his gut. It was a primal, instinctual wrongness that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He saw how the light failed at the forest's edge, how the very ground transitioned from living soil to a dark, damp loam that absorbed all sound. He held back as the others, their curiosity piqued, moved forward. Then they heard it, a sound, faint at first, like a distant ethereal flute. It was a melody of impossible beauty, a call that bypassed the ears and resonated directly with some deep forgotten part of the soul. It promised peace, euphoria, a release from all worldly cares. "By the moons," someone whispered, their voice filled with awe. "What is that sound?" The team, save for Reese, was captivated. They moved as one, drawn towards the tree line, their professional caution momentarily forgotten. "Reese, come on!" Lorien called back, a strange, blissful smile on his face. "Don't be so skittish, Reese. This is what we do. Trust me, whatever is over this threshold is definitely worth exploring. Imagine the tales we'll bring back." Another man let out a dismissive sigh, his voice a low murmur of disdain. "There's always one in every expedition group. So squeamish." Reese felt torn. His duty warred with the screaming instinct to flee. He took a hesitant step forward, peering into the gloom. He could see his companions crossing the threshold, their faces immediately alight with wonder as they stepped into a world of phosphorescent marvels. Glowing fungi pulsed with soft internal light, casting eerie hues of violet and corpse blue on the trunks of massive, obsidian-black trees. Strange, luminescent flowers unfurled their petals in the perpetual twilight, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and a heady, sweet perfume. The explorers cried out in exultation, pointing at gloamwood sprites that flickered like motes of captured starlight and laughing as they tried to touch the shimmering, iridescent wings of glimmerwing moths. Looking up, the canopy was not a ceiling of leaves, but an alien cosmos of swirling, branch-like structures and treetops that resembled nothing of Earth, a backdrop that seemed to stretch into an endless, shadowed void. High above, hidden in the boughs of a colossal gloomwood, a detachment of 5 figures watched the scene unfold. They were night elves, their pale grey-blue skin marked with the raised red scars of their coven. Their luminous, amethyst eyes regarded the humans below with a mixture of disdain and mild, clinical curiosity. The youngest of the elves spoke. To the ears of men, his voice was a melodic hiss, a sibilant sound that should have been incomprehensible. Yet, its meaning was made perfectly clear by Nodish, the miraculous imprint all beings in this new world shared. It was this subconscious translator, discovered in the early confusing days when men of different nations argued over what language the other was speaking. It was that imprint that allowed the elf's contempt to be understood, even as the alien quality of his voice remained.
Look, brother,
he hissed.
The lesser beings, they are drawn to the lure bloom. So simple, so naive.
The leader of the detachment, a tall, imposing male with 3 jagged scars on each shoulder, merely nodded, his gaze fixed on the scene below.
Observe. Their minds are weak, their genetics flawed. They are little more than beasts, driven by their base impulses. They are not worthy of our notice, let alone our arrows.
Down below, the explorers were now fully immersed in the forest's alien beauty, but the sweet perfume was becoming intoxicating. Rhys, still standing at the forest's edge, watched as the lucid wonder in his companion's eyes began to glaze over. Their movements became less deliberate, their steps now guided by an unseen force. They were walking deeper into the forest, their expressions slackening into a state of blissful stupor.
"Lorien!"
Rhys shouted, his voice cracking.
"Alyssa! Can you hear me? What's going on?"
There was no response. The explorers continued their slow, inexorable march. From the Night Elves' perspective, the scene was clear. The humans had wandered into the pheromone field of the lure bloom. Microscopic, parasitic spores, visible to their keen eyes as a shimmering haze, filled the air. Inhaled by the explorers, these spores latched onto the brainstem, shutting down all higher reasoning, leaving only the primal desire to move towards the source of the euphoric stimulus. The explorers' excited chatter died down, replaced by an unnerving silence. Rhys crept closer to the edge, his heart pounding.
"Hello! I said, what's going on? Are you all right?"
His frantic calls were met with nothing. He could just make out their silhouettes moving slowly through the gloom, and the coldness in his gut solidified into ice. Then, the world dissolved into a nightmare. The ground in the clearing erupted. A massive, Venus flytrap-like head, easily 10 feet across, burst from the earth on a thick fluid stalk that moved with impossible speed. In the same instant, dozens of dark green, whip-like vines shot out from the stalk, ensnaring his companions. He saw their bodies violently snatched into the air, their limbs flailing uselessly before being pinned to their sides. And then, the screaming began. The lure bloom, having secured its prey, released a second counteragent spore. The euphoric trance was shattered, and the explorers awoke to a reality of pure, undiluted terror. They were suspended in the air, held fast by the crushing grip of the vines, staring into the gaping maw of the monstrous plant. The plant's secondary function began. It fed on their fear. The vines pulsed, not with venom, but with a psychic assault, flooding the minds of the trapped men and women with their deepest, most primal fears. The fine cilia on the vines had already penetrated their skin, unseen and unfelt, creating a metaphysical conduit to their central nervous systems. The screams that tore through the forest were no longer human. They were the raw animal shrieks of souls being stripped bare, of minds breaking under an unbearable weight of psychic torment. Rhys saw bodies convulse, their limbs thrashing in a grotesque dance of agony. He saw their forms begin to wither, their skin turning gray and desiccated as the plant drained them not just of life, but of their very essence. The plant's massive head snapped forward, engulfing Lorien's upper body with a sickening wet crunch before retracting, swallowing him down its thick, pulsating gullet. That was what finally broke Rhys. A choked sob escaped his lips, and he stumbled backward, falling onto the damp earth. He crab-walked away from the tree line, his eyes wide with a terror that had seared itself onto his very soul.
The other one flees,
the young elf noted, a hint of amusement in his hissing voice.
Shall we silence it?
The leader turned his cold, amethyst gaze towards the pathetic, scrambling figure.
No, let it go. Such a creature is not worth the fletching of an arrow. Let it carry its terror back to the filthy hole it crawled out from. It is of no consequence to us.
Rhys scrambled to his feet and ran. He ran without thought, without direction, his only instinct to put as much distance as possible between himself and the forest of nightmares. Tears streamed down his face, his breath coming in ragged, hysterical sobs. The world he had known, the vibrant, hopeful world of Nox, had been a lie. Beneath its beautiful surface, horrors beyond his darkest imaginings lurked, waiting. For the next 2 days, he was a man unmoored from reality. He stumbled through the wilderness, the inhuman screams of his friends echoing in his mind. The first night, a cold rain began to fall, but he didn't seek shelter. He simply collapsed in the mud, his body racked with fits of weeping. The second night, he tried to start a fire, but his hands shook so violently that he couldn't strike the flint and steel together. In a fit of rage and self-loathing, he hurled the stones into the darkness, screaming his frustration at the uncaring moons. He was a man broken, a hollowed-out shell filled with a terror so profound it had scoured him clean of everything he had once been. He was no longer an explorer. He was a messenger, a vessel for a truth so terrible that it would forever change the way the race of men saw their new home. Two days after Rhys fled the shadowed edge of the world, the rhythms of Larendor continued, blissfully unaware. The blue sun was beginning its slow climb toward midday. From the lookout post atop the western palisade wall, a man named Jorik leaned into the shimmering, crystal-lensed scope of the observational station. The device, one of the two eyes of Larendor that flanked the main gate, was a marvel of Noxian craft. Its telescoping stand allowed for 360-degree rotation, and its powerful lenses could bring the horizon into sharp focus, making it possible to identify friend or foe from miles away. He methodically scanned the shimmering heat rising from the plains before a flicker of movement drew his focus. He adjusted the polished Noxian metal stand, fine-tuning the magnification. A slow, appreciative whistle escaped his lips. "Well now, would you look at that?" he murmured, nudging the man beside him. "Torvin, get a look at this." It's not a boar. Fur as dark as a storm cloud, claws like obsidian. By the moons, it's a shadow cat. The man, Torvin, held the honored title of Hearthcaller. It was his duty to act as the voice of the wall, translating the lookout's observations into the clear, coded language of the village. He leaned over, his own eyes following Yorik's pointing finger to the distant party of men struggling with a heavily laden cart on the main path.
A shadow cat,
he breathed, his own excitement palpable.
Twice in 1 week. Maybe I should try my hand at Skystones tonight. I mean, certainly, the dice have to be in my favor after luck like this.
He chuckled, shaking his head. A massive haul on Monday, and now another. It was the sort of thing that had happened only once or twice in their 10 years here. Knowing his first shift would end long before any festivities began, his heart felt a little lighter. Jorik moved the scope slightly to the northwest, tracking along a secondary path that merged with the main road. And that's not all, he added. The logging team is making their first run. Looks like a full load of sunwood. Torvin nodded, his expression shifting to one of professional focus. He turned to the third man on the wide walkway, the bell warden, who stood ready beside the massive vigil bell.
2 parties approaching. Native alignment,
Torvin called out, his voice crisp and clear.
First call for the hunters. 2 rings. Pause. 2 rings. Pause. 4 rings. Second call for the loggers. 2 rings. Pause. 2 rings.
The bell warden acknowledged with a sharp nod and began to strike the great bell, its deep, resonant tones echoing across the entire village, a clear and precise language for all to hear. Once the formal announcement was made, Torvin leaned over the edge of the palisade and bellowed down to the gate guards below, a more informal act of camaraderie.
Looks like another feast tonight, lads. The hunters are bringing in a shadow cat. A big one.
Down at the gate, the 4 guards exchanged excited glances. One of them, a stout, jovial man named Garrick, turned to the 2 teenage apprentices who served as runners, their faces already alight with anticipation. All right, lads, you heard the man. A feast for a shadow cat. Now, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye, which of you shall be the one to deliver the glad tidings to the mayor's office? It was a familiar game, a small reprieve from the monotony of their duty that the guards enjoyed. The 2 apprentices, Finn and Liam, had been friends and rivals for years, and their competitive spirit was a source of constant amusement. Before the words had fully left Garrick's mouth, Finn, a boy with a shock of red hair, shot his hand up, shouting, "Me!" a fraction of a second before Liam could open his mouth. Liam groaned in good-natured defeat as the guards chuckled. "Quick as ever, Finn," Garrick laughed. "Off with you, then. Let the mayor know." Finn beamed, his face alight with the honor. He took off at a sprint, his path taking him along the wide, hard-packed earth of the Hearth Road. He was a blur of youthful exuberance, his feet pounding a happy rhythm against the ground as he passed the industrial district.
My, Finn. Aren't we a little more excited than usual?
Called a woman from the entrance of the communal laundry, her hands soapy. He grinned, shouting back over his shoulder without breaking stride, "I can't stop, but make sure to attend the square tonight. The hunters brought back a shadow cat. We're having a feast." He passed the abattoir and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's forge, the air filled with the scent of sawdust from the lumber mill and baking bread from the kitchens. It was the scent of life, of purpose. Far from the gate, in a secluded, undeveloped stretch of forest in the northern part of Lerendor, 3 figures lounged by a still pond. Genesidus stared at the horizon, his expression a familiar mask of boredom and disdain.
"Another glorious day,"
he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
"We get to skip rocks to our heart's content."
Scrupulon, ever cheerful, let out a laugh. He skipped a flat stone across the water's surface, watching it bounce 7 times before sinking. Yes, yes. Skip rocks today, skip rocks tomorrow. And who knows, maybe the day after that we might do something truly exciting like, oh, I don't know. Skip yet. Another pail of rocks. Delenius, who had been silently competing with Scrupulon, let out a rare chuckle. His own stone followed, managing 8 skips. Scrupulon groaned theatrically. It was then that the sound reached them, faint but clear, carried on the breeze. 2 rings, a pause, 2 rings, a pause, then 4. The sequence repeated, followed shortly by a simpler pattern of 2 rings, then 2 more. My, Scrupulon said, his interest piqued. 2 separate hauls coming in this time of day?
The first is to be expected,
Delenius noted, his voice low and pragmatic.
The logging team makes their first run around now, but the second?
Genesidus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine interest finally breaking through his apathy.
If I had to guess, it's today's hunters. Back with an especially oversized haul, I'd imagine.
Scrupulon let out a low whistle. You don't say! That makes 2 in 1 week. I'd say this is cause for a celebration. Don't you think? He said the last word with a knowing grin. For weeks, he had been subtly gathering information about a new delicacy, a fabled jerky made from the hide of a rare beast the hunters had brought down a month prior, an auroch drake. The story was that a young apprentice at the abattoir had found a shriveled piece of its hide that had been left to cure in the sun by accident. On a whim, he'd popped it in his mouth and discovered a flavor so sublime, a texture so satisfying, that it induced a state of lasting euphoria. The discovery had led to weeks of secret, rigorous experimentation by the head chefs to replicate the process. Scrupulon had pieced the story together from whispers at the granary, learning that the resulting auroch hide jerky was a delicacy so rare and difficult to produce that its small hidden reserve was a secret known only to a select few. A secret he had, of course, already shared with Genesidus. Oi, Scrupulon added. Today's Wednesday, isn't it? Doesn't that mean Vexort is on duty for the lumber haul?
Aye,
Delenius confirmed.
Think he's with the team that's just returned.
Well,
Genesidus said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face as he rose to his feet.
There's only one way to find out, isn't there? Come on, we're heading down to the gate. Don't worry,
he added, glancing at Scrupulon.
I have every confidence that your precious rocks will still be here when next we return.
Scrupulon let out another good-hearted laugh, the sound echoing across the pond, the laugh of a man reveling in the simple freedom of the moment, a world away from the gilded cage of his lineage and the stifling life his parents had always intended to bestow upon him, a life he never wanted. The apprentice runner, Finn, finally reached the mayor's longhouse, a structure slightly larger than the other simple but sturdy wooden dwellings, distinguished only by its function, not by any hint of luxury. His chest was heaving as he burst through the entrance. The door guard, recognizing the boy's haste, simply stepped aside with a knowing smile. Finn found himself in the main office, a room filled not with finery, but with the practical tools of a village being built from the ground up. The walls were covered with hand-drawn maps of the surrounding territories, detailed schematics for aqueducts, and stacks of trade ledgers. Mayor Alaric was not at his desk. Instead, sitting in his chair and poring over a thick ledger, was a woman who was, in many ways, the true heart of the village. She was in her 60s, her face a lovely canvas of gentle wrinkles, her eyes filled with a timeless warmth. She had been swept into Nox alone, a loss that was not of sudden death, but of an impossible, uncrossable distance. Every day, she lived with the quiet, aching knowledge that the children and grandchildren whose laughter had once filled her home were lost to her, left behind in a world she would never see again. In the early, desperate days of Larendor, that profound emptiness had nearly consumed her. But seeing the lost and frightened children, some orphaned by the cataclysm, she had found a new purpose. She had transformed the ghost of her own grief into a boundless well of love for every child in this new world. Though her name was Maeve, a name she offered with a smile at every introduction, she always followed it with, "But please, call me Nana." And so, from the smallest toddler to the most stoic guard, she was Nana, the nurturer of innocence, a role she had not sought, but had become, making her an indispensable pillar of their community and a natural choice for the Hearth Council.
"Finn, my dear boy,"
she exclaimed, looking up from the ledger, her smile instantly reaching her eyes.
"What has you in such a hurry?"
The boy's professional decorum, so carefully maintained during his run, shattered in her presence. He was no longer an apprentice on duty. He was a child bursting with news for the woman who was, in all but blood, his grandmother. He rushed forward, forgetting all protocol, and wrapped her in a fierce, cheek-to-cheek hug. "Nana, guess what? Guess what?" She returned the embrace, her heart swelling with an affection that was the very core of her new reason for being. She held him for a moment before pulling back, her hands on his shoulders.
Let's see,"
she said, her voice full of playful intrigue, beginning their familiar guessing game.
"Did Garrick finally let you practice with the gate winch?"
"No!" He giggled, bouncing on the balls of his feet, his face flushed with excitement.
"Oh, not that then?"
She feigned deep thought, tapping a finger to her chin.
"Okay then, maybe. Did that stubborn grave-hauler Bessie finally have her calf?"
"No, wrong again," he chirped, his anticipation building. She looked utterly stumped, her expression a perfect mask of theatrical confusion.
"Well, I'm all out of guesses, it would seem. You've beaten me once again, haven't you?"
They shared a bright, genuine laugh, the sound filling the quiet office. She finally relented, her eyes twinkling.
"Okay, I give up. What is it that's got those legs in such a tizzy today?"
"The hunters!" he burst out, the words tumbling over each other in his excitement. "They're back!" And the caller said, "The hall is even bigger than Monday's. It's a shadow cat, a huge one. We're having another feast." Nana's eyes widened, her own excitement mirroring his.
"A shadow cat? Oh my. Well then, there's no time to waste. You've given me all the notice I need. I'll make the necessary recordings in our ledger."
She gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze.
"You, however, have another vital stop to make, don't you?"
Finn's grin was enormous. He gave a quick, respectful nod that was now second nature, his duty momentarily remembered, before turning and sprinting back out the door. His next stop was the main kitchen, to give the head director the news. As he ran off, Nana watched him go, a warm, lingering smile on her face. Then, as she turned back to the desk, a thought. No, a feeling, a deep intuitive stirring she had learned never to ignore, took hold. It was a subtle shift in the air, a hum of energy that spoke of something more than just a feast. Tonight is special, it seemed to whisper in her soul. Tonight is important. She closed the ledger. The decision was made, not through logic, but through a profound inner knowing that had never led her astray. With the graceful movements of an esteemed lady befitting her station, she walked to the door, advising the attaché on duty, a young man named Corin.
I shall return shortly.
Corin, ever dutiful, looked up from his post with a hint of surprise. If you don't mind my asking, my lady, may I inquire as to the nature of your sudden, somewhat hurried departure, especially at so early an hour? Nana's smile was kind, but enigmatic, a hint of joyful conspiracy in her eyes.
Oh, you'll see. Let's just say something special has just come up, and I don't wish to waste such a momentous opportunity.
The attaché, though baffled, knew better than to question her. He had seen the way the village responded to her, the quiet wisdom she carried. He gave a curt bow. Yes, milady. Well, should you require anything of me, you have only to say the word. As always, I am at your complete disposal. Seeing his earnestness, Nana returned the kindness, placing a soft hand on his shoulder. The gesture was warm, appreciative, and it instantly put him at ease.
Don't worry, Corin. I should be back before you know it. Don't hesitate to seek me out should anything pressing arise. I shall be in the town square or thereabouts. I need to have a word with Kaelin.
As Nana stepped into the town square, wearing a modest but elegant dress of deep, wine-colored gloom thread, a fabric woven from the iridescent fibers of a rare, shade-loving plant, the news of the feast was already spreading like wildfire. The air, already alive with the sounds of a bustling afternoon, now hummed with an added layer of joyful anticipation. She moved with the deliberate, unhurried grace of a beloved elder, her attire a statement of quiet elegance. A group of toddlers, playing a chasing game near the circle of embers, spotted her and abandoned their game with squeals of delight. "Nana! Nana!" they cried, rushing toward her as a chaotic, giggling mob. She knelt, her smile genuine and all-encompassing, opening her arms to receive them. They crashed into her, a tangle of small limbs and unrestrained affection. She laughed, giving each one her full attention, listening patiently as their excited, overlapping stories of the big monster the hunters had caught tumbled out in a stream of half-formed words.
"It was huge!"
shouted a little boy named Pip.
"And it had big teeth!"
added a little girl, Yulissa.
And Finn told us!"
Pip declared, puffing out his chest with the importance of the news. After several minutes of this happy chaos, their mothers, who had been watching from nearby, began to approach. "All right, little ones, let Nana be," one of them said gently. Nana gave each child a final warm hug, ruffling Pip's hair and tapping Yulissa on the nose, which sent her into another fit of giggles. As the mothers led their children away, one, a young woman named Lyra, who was heavy with her fifth child, lingered. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes.
"Oh, dearie, you look beautiful as ever today,"
Nana said, taking her hands. The simple kindness in her voice was too much for Lyra. The young woman's face crumpled, and she melted into Nana's shoulder, a single heartbreaking sob escaping her. Nana held her, stroking her hair, letting the young woman cry. After a moment, Lyra pulled back, wiping at her tears with her sleeve, a look of embarrassment on her face.
Oh, Nana, I'm so sorry. It's Broderick, Nana. He's so worried. He's a good man. He'd work himself to the bone for us, but I see the strain in his eyes every single morning. I pretend I'm still asleep, but I watch him. He just sits there, and well, the energy he used to have is just gone. That joy he had when he'd wake me with a hug, it's been replaced by this heavy silence. I'm losing him, Nana. I'm losing the man I married, and I don't know what to do.
Nana's expression softened with a deep, knowing empathy, her own memories of her eldest son's fears flickering in her mind.
Never you mind that, child. You let Nana handle this. When life injects a new element of uncertainty, we can often lose sight of where our hearts truly lay. It's at these times that eyes unclouded by the storm can help teach the clouded ones to see the sun again. Tell you what, I'm hosting a dinner this Sunday. I would be honored if you, Broderick, and your little ones would attend as my guests.
Lyra stammered, overwhelmed.
Oh, wow. No, we couldn't. We couldn't dare impose on you that way, Nana. I mean, it wouldn't be proper.
Oh, pish posh. I only ever stand on decorum when it pertains to official matters of the council. When it comes to matters of the people, the very people I live to serve, those people come first.
Oh, just accept already, Lyra.
One of the other mothers called out with an encouraging giggle.
Don't worry,
Nana said reassuringly, giving Lyra's hands a final, gentle squeeze.
What you're going through is not nearly so uncommon as you might imagine. My request for dinner is for more than a mere meal. It is an opportunity for doing what Nana seems to be known for doing best. For mending the wounds of the heart, for helping to reshape the tumult of chaos into harmony, and for ensuring the love we have here continues to grow, so that the children born of it can foster an even greater capacity for it in the generations to come.
Lyra, her eyes still shimmering with tears, finally nodded, a look of profound gratitude on her face.
Yes, Nana, it would be our honor to attend.
Excellent,
Nana replied warmly.
9 o'clock of the bell, then.
After the women departed, their spirits visibly lifted, Nana continued her search, finally finding Kalen, the head director of the food teams, as he was striding toward the kitchen, already shouting instructions to his staff.
Kalen, my dear,
she said, pulling him aside.
A moment.
Milady, he beamed, his face flushed with the happy chaos. For you, always. Whatever it is you need, you've but to ask it.
That special recipe we spoke of,
she said, her eyes twinkling.
The one I challenged you with a few months ago.
Kalen put a hand to his chin. Which one? The sweet ember loaf with the berry garnish? Nana smiled warmly.
No, the other one.
Ah, the sunfruit cobbler then? Or perhaps the spiced glimmerroot pie?
No, the other one, Kalen,
she said, her smile widening. Finally, seeing his continued confusion, she leaned in, her voice dropping with a mix of excitement and gravity.
Kalen, I'm talking about that one, the truly special one. I know we had planned to wait for the next seasonal gathering, but something about today, it feels momentous. My intuition tells me that tonight is the night to unveil it.
A look of dawning realization, followed by mock trauma, crossed Kalen's face. Oh, that one! Oh dear. Well now, Nana, he trailed off. Tonight, you say? I'll tell you, I've wrestled with some complex recipes before, but nothing like that. For a minute there, I began to question whether it'd even be possible. One layer needs to be kept cold, another moist and fluffy, and then there's all the icing. If I'm being honest, when you first described it to me, I had my doubts. And for a moment there, just for a moment, I thought I'd end up plucking out what few strands of hair I've got left. But this team, I tell you, they are truly a marvel. Somehow, it all just started coming together. He sighed, then grinned. You know Delilah, one of my staff. She very nearly fainted from joy when she tasted the last batch. Aye, Nana. Indeed, I think it is ready. So now, tell me, how many servings do you think we might need? Asked Kaelin. She replied,
Enough for every child. And then it'll be first come, first served. For the rest. And also, thank you so very much, Kaelin, for all the effort that you and your staff have put into making all of this possible. I hope you understand, and please forgive me for springing this on you so suddenly. Were it any other circumstance, I would never even consider doing such a thing. It's just that tonight somehow feels special. As if it's one of great significance. Like it's a night that is meant to be remembered.
I assure you, my lady, Kaelin said with a respectful bow, already mentally rearranging schedules and supply chains. There is nothing to forgive. Any request coming from you will, as always, be one that I am all too happy to receive. Please rest assured, Kaelin continued, his head now raised, staring up into the cosmos, as if gazing into the eyes of some unknown presence, that we, my staff and I, will do all we can to ensure that tonight, of all nights, will be one worthy of remembrance. Genesidas, Delenius, and Scrupulon made their way down from the northern hills, keeping to the shadows of the tree line that bordered the wide, clear expanse leading to the western gate. From their vantage point, they watched the scene unfold. The inner gate guards and their 2 apprentices were interacting with a jovial ease, a clear break from their usual stoic decorum. The sight confirmed Genesidas' suspicion. Something had warranted a celebration. They didn't have to wait long. The hunting party came into full view, their cart groaning under the weight of a truly immense beast. It was a hulking, feline predator, with claws like polished obsidian and fur the color of a storm cloud. A day fail, one of the most formidable creatures in the known lands. Wow, Scrupulon whistled, his eyes wide. Looks like they really outdid themselves this time. I'd say your squad has some competition this week. That one vastly outmatches that boar you all brought back on Monday. He paused, a mischievous glint in his eye. Oh wait, that's right. You 2 didn't actually help out with that one, did you? Genesidas ignored the jibe, his sharp eyes scanning the scene, not with awe, but with a cold, analytical focus. He watched the way the gate guards efficiently directed the internal crew that had arrived to help haul the cart toward the abattoir, his lip curling slightly at their mindless communal effort. A few minutes later, the vigil bell rang out its sequence once more, and the lumbering 20-foot cart of the logging team began its slow approach. It was laden with heavy sunwood logs, pulled and pushed by a team of 30 men, their muscles straining, their faces slick with sweat. And among them, his own face, set with grim determination, was Vexort. Genesidas put 2 fingers to his lips and let out a short, sharp whistle, a prearranged signal. a sound like a hunting bird that was easily lost in the ambient noise of the village. Vexort's head turned for a fraction of a second, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, before he faced forward again. A small, knowing smile touching his lips as he continued his grueling work. The three friends waited, concealed in the shadows. It took nearly an hour for the logging team to unload their haul and prepare for their next run. Finally, Vexord emerged from the lumber mill, clutching his stomach, and slipped into the trees. "Stomach cramps," he said with a grin, the lie coming easily to his lips. "Captain thinks I've got a case of the river flux."
"Excellent,"
Genesidas said, his voice devoid of warmth.
"One more stop before we collect our little helpers."
Their path took them toward the seasoning yard, a vast open field where massive stacks of timber were left to cure under the watchful eyes of a few specialists. Here, the work was not of brute strength, but of patience and precision. They found the fifth member of their inner circle, Sepmi, standing alone, his attention fixed on a stack of rare sunwood. He was running a gloved hand over the wood's glossy, non-porous surface, his expression one of intense, almost unnerving concentration. Sepmi was a man of few words, but his quietness was not one of simplicity. Behind his placid exterior, his mind was a whirlwind of complex calculations, of schemes and counter-schemes, a genius-level intellect constantly running simulations of social and political collapse for his own amusement.
"Hello, Sepmi,"
Genesidas said, his tone holding a degree of respect he rarely afforded others.
"We're moving tonight."
Sepmi didn't look up from the wood, but a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "The jerky, I presume?" he asked, his voice a soft, low murmur.
"The feast provides the perfect cover,"
Genesidas confirmed. Sepmi finally turned, his gaze sweeping over the four of them. "A sound deduction," he said simply, before falling into step with them, his part in the day's charade complete. Their final stop was the southeastern outskirts of the village. As they approached the small, isolated dwelling near the compost fields, a sound, so out of place in this quiet, functional corner of Larendor, reached them. The sound of unrestrained, joyous laughter. Genesidas held up a hand, and his four companions fell silent, their curiosity piqued. Down by the riverbank, just as Mayor Alaric had witnessed all those years ago, were the four young men the village had come to call the Odd Ones. The name had been born of a sad, perplexing paradox. In the village proper, Antogas, Daporta, Rodari, and Tempest were like frightened animals. They moved as a single, shuffling unit, their eyes always downcast, flinching from even the kindest greeting. They never spoke, and any attempt at interaction would send them folding in on themselves, their eyes darting about as if seeking an escape from a physical assault. The villagers, out of a mixture of pity and discomfort, had learned to give them a wide berth. But back during the formative years of Larendor, there were whispers, confirmed by, now, Mayor Alaric himself, of a different truth, that when left to themselves, in the sanctuary of their isolation, these four were not just odd. For while they were indeed that, there was something more to them as well. And here, by the river, was the proof. Antogas was chasing Daporta in a clumsy, joyous game of tag, their laughter echoing off the water. Rodari and Tempest sat on the bank, skipping stones and cheering them on, their faces alight with a simple, profound happiness that no one in the village ever saw. In this secluded space, they were not the fearful, withdrawn creatures of their reputation. They were simply 4 friends. The laughter died the instant Genesidas stepped out of the trees. The joy vanished from their faces as if wiped away by a cold hand. Their bodies tensed, shoulders hunching, and they instinctively drew closer together, forming a tight, defensive cluster. Their eyes, which had been bright with life moments before, were now wide with a familiar, hunted fear.
Well, well,
Genesidas called out, his voice dripping with a false, condescending cheer that made the 4 of them visibly recoil.
If it isn't my favorite little rock scrapers. Enjoying our time off, are we? Well, don't get too comfortable. As it so happens, your workday isn't quite so finished as you seem to have imagined. Such ridiculousness just watching the 4 of you and what you choose to do with your downtime. Fortunately for you, you have one, such as myself, to guide the usage of your time toward more productive ends. Now, come along, you're with us tonight.
Antigas, the unspoken leader of the 4, took a half-step forward, his gaze fixed on the ground. "But, sir, our shift is over," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Genesidas strode forward until he was towering over them, his shadow engulfing them.
Did I ask what your shift was?
He sneered.
I gave you an order. Or do you need a reminder of how our arrangement works?
He let the threat hang in the air, a palpable thing. The 4 of them flinched as one, the memory of past cruelties clearly visible on their faces. They didn't protest further. They simply fell into line behind Vexort, their silent, shuffling obedience a world away from the easy camaraderie of the other 5. They were not friends being invited. They were tools being collected. As dusk began to settle, the 9 of them made their way to the provisions district. Genesidas led them to a large windowless larder, its heavy wooden door secured with a thick iron lock.
This is it,
he said, his voice a low whisper.
Scrupulan's source confirmed that the kitchen staff were complaining about having to haul the special curing salts to the north larder, the one with the reinforced cellar. This is the only one that fits.
Moments later, after the now fully assembled members of his makeshift party of 9 had all slinked into the shadows, finally reappearing at the rear of the building, Genesidas turned to the odd ones, his finger pointing upward.
Here we are, the back wall where, as you 4 may not have noticed, seeing as how you seldom notice much, there is a ventilation window on the 2nd floor. Deporta, you're the smallest. You're going up.
Deporta looked up at the sheer wooden wall, his eyes wide with terror. He shook his head, a silent plea.
Do it,
Genesidas hissed,
or I'll have Sepmi remind you of the consequences of disobedience.
With a whimper, Deporta moved to the wall. The climb was treacherous, the wooden planks offering little in the way of handholds. Twice he slipped, his fingers scrabbling for purchase, but the silent, terrified glares from his 3 friends spurred him on. Finally, he reached the window, a narrow slit barely wide enough for his emaciated frame. He squeezed through, disappearing into the darkness. Minutes later, the sound of a heavy bar being lifted echoed from the back of the building, and the door creaked open. The remaining 8 of them slipped inside. The larder was a maze of shelves and crates, the air thick with the smell of dried herbs and grains. They moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the dirt floor. After a tense 10-minute search, Sepmi pointed to a small, unassuming crate tucked away in a dark corner. Genesidas pried it open with his dagger. Inside, nestled in oilcloth, were dozens of long, thin strips of the dark, glistening auroch hide jerky. Genesidas took a strip, a triumphant, predatory smile spreading across his face. Tonight, the feast would have a new, uninvited main event. That night, Larendor was transformed. The town square, the village's communal heart, was a sea of joyous activity. The hearthlight grills, two long rectangular pits forged from a unique, heat-resistant black Noxian metal, sizzled and hissed, sending plumes of savory smoke into the cool night air. Over years of use, the metal had developed a faint, emerald green shimmer, and when heated, it released a subtle energy that magically enhanced the natural flavors of the meat. Huge cuts of the day fail sizzled over the glowing embers, its rich, gamey aroma mingling with the scent of hearth-baked loaves of sun-grain bread, platters of roasted glimmer root drizzled with wild honey, and bowls of stewed river greens and savory mushrooms being carried out from the serving kitchens. The 18 tables of unity overflowed with bounty. Carved wooden bowls of sunfruit cobbler, ember nut tarts, and sweet butter muffins topped with a glistening berry garnish. All testaments to Nana's gentle influence on the village's palate. The entire square was a symphony of sensory delight, a vibrant living expression of the community's prosperity and gratitude. Villagers gathered at the tables of unity, 18 massive, round tables crafted from the same rare, polished sunwood as the village's aqueducts, their surfaces gleaming in the firelight. Each 15-foot diameter table was a world unto itself, fostering the easy camaraderie that had become the bedrock of Larendor's culture. Laughter and stories were shared across the 17 tables meant for all, while the 18th, positioned at the southern end, served as the head table for Mayor Alaric and the Hearth Council. Its surface was a work of art, inlaid with the symbol of Larendor, a stylized watermill wheel representing their ingenuity, with a rising sun at its center symbolizing the hope of their new beginning. Mugs of low-alcohol ale were raised in endless toasts and cheers, a rare treat provided by the gilded mug. Situated on the southeastern edge of the square, the village's primary social house typically served stimulating morning brews and calming evening teas during the work week. The serving of ale, even a mild brew like this, was reserved only for special feasts and Saturday nights, and its presence signaled that tonight was truly an occasion for unreserved celebration. Energized by the joyous crowd, the village band played with a feverish joy, their lutes, drums, and flutes weaving a melody that was both wild and beautiful, a soundtrack for a night of pure, unadulterated bliss. Later, as the four moons climbed high in the sky, casting a multi-hued glow over the square, Nana made her way to the circle of embers. This 30-foot platform of polished sunwood with its in-ground fire pit was a sacred space for the youth. And as she approached, the children, sensing the shift, began to gather. The feast was in full swing, but a reverent hush fell over the center of the square as she took her seat. The parents, watching from the tables of unity, smiled to themselves, their conversations softening as they anticipated the familiar magic that was about to unfold. As Nana began to speak, her voice a comforting melodic thread in the tapestry of the night, Kalen appeared from the serving kitchens, a knowing twinkle in his eye. He gestured to his staff, who emerged carrying steaming mugs, and a massive wooden bowl. A wave of excited whispers rippled through the children. It was Nana's legendary hot chocolate, a facsimile born from her challenge to the guilds. Foragers had discovered a bitter, earthy bean that, when roasted and ground, produced a rich, dark powder. This was mixed with creamy milk from the village's livestock and sweetened with a syrup extracted from the sap of the sun petal tree. The result was a steaming, decadent beverage that tasted of warmth and home. The large bowl Kaelin placed beside Nana was filled with fluffy, pillow-like cubes of a sweet, spongy confection, a marshmallow analog made from whipped honey, and a gelatinous root. The children gasped with delight. As Nana began her tale, they eagerly took mugs and dropped the fluffy pillows into the simmering cocoa, watching them melt into a sweet, foamy layer of lushness. The parents saw the looks of pure contentment on their children's faces and felt a profound sense of peace settle over them. They saw not just their sons and daughters, but the future of Lerendor, a legacy being forged not in steel, but in moments of shared, simple joy like this. They knew, in that instant, that every drop of sweat, every moment of hardship, was worth it for this. This was the payoff. Nana's voice wove through the night, telling tales of old Earth, of a noble king named Arthur, a fabled sword drawn from a stone, and a mysterious, wandering guide named Merlin, who saw greatness in a boy no one else did. The children? Their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the fire pit, listened with wide-eyed wonder, their imaginations transported to a world they had never known, their little hands occasionally reaching out for another marshmallow pillow. Just as her story reached its climax, Nana paused, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. On cue, Kaelin emerged once more from the kitchens, this time with a grand procession. 4 of his strongest staff members carried a massive wooden platter between them, and upon it rested the true surprise of the night. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the children, followed by a low chorus of oohs and ahs. Even the adults at the tables fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. It was a cake, a massive, multi-layered double chocolate fudge and caramel truffle masterpiece, the culmination of months of secret, dedicated work. Each layer was a different texture, a different shade of rich, dark brown, held together by thick ribbons of glistening caramel. It was topped with swirls of whipped cream as white as fresh snow, and dusted with shimmering edible manna sprinkles that caught the firelight and sparkled like 1,000 tiny stars. It was more than a dessert. It was a work of art, a taste of a world lost, reborn in the magic of Nox. It was a promise, made manifest in sugar and flour, that even here, in this new, wild world, there could be beauty, there could be wonder, and there could be moments of absolute, perfect joy. And as Nana looked at the sea of astonished, happy faces, she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, that this night would indeed be one to remember. The joy in the square was palpable, a tangible energy that seemed to make the very air hum. It was a night of pure, unadulterated bliss, a final, perfect expression of Lerendor's innocent hope. But on the northeastern outskirts of the square, hidden in the shadows of an overhanging copse of trees, 9 figures watched. Their presence was a cold pocket in the warmth of the celebration. They had arrived late, their grand entrance meticulously planned. Genesidas had envisioned it perfectly. They would stroll into the square, strips of the priceless auroch hide jerky dangling from their lips, a blatant display of their superiority. He had anticipated the glares of envy, the whispered accusations, the delicious, undeniable proof that he and his followers operated on a plane above their petty rules. He would have smiled, chewed slowly, and savored their resentment. Instead, they found a celebration so vibrant, so all-consuming, that their arrival went utterly unnoticed. Their defiant act of thievery, their intended power play, was swallowed by the overwhelming tide of communal joy. They were insignificant, and Genesidas seethed. Every laugh that echoed from the square, every cheer, every clinking of mugs was a personal insult. He sat on a fallen log, the stolen jerky tasting like ash in his mouth, his fury a palpable aura that silenced his companions, drawing them into his menacing gloom. He watched the rock scrapers dance and sing, their faces alight with a simple, idiotic happiness he found utterly revolting. How dare they? The thought coiled in his mind, a venomous serpent. How dare they be so content in their mediocrity? How dare they ignore me? It was near the end of the night when a young couple, their arms linked, their faces flushed with happiness and ale, stumbled near the hiding spot. "Hey!" the young man laughed, his voice full of infectious cheer. "Sorry, I didn't see you there." "Say, what are you all doing back here? The party's this way." His girlfriend chimed in, her voice bright.
Ooh, and that cake Nana brought is simply to die for. You'd best hurry.
The boyfriend, not picking up on the cold silence, tried again, his jovial tone now tinged with a hint of uncertainty. Are you guys all right? Wait, Genesidas? Is that you?" Genesidas rose slowly, his tall frame seeming to pull the shadows up with him. He stepped into the moonlight, his eyes cold and flat. He ignored the young man, his gaze fixing on the girl.
"Just now,"
he said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper,
"you mentioned there being something worth dying for. Did you not?"
The girl's smile faltered, confusion and fear beginning to cloud her happy expression.
Well, yes, but I didn't exactly mean...
"Oh, no."
Genesidas cut her off, taking a step closer, his shadow falling over her.
"I'm almost certain I heard you correctly. Delinius, am I mistaken? Did she or did she not state that within the joys she experienced throughout the night, she came across something she thought was to die for?"
Delinius, from the shadows, gave a curt nod.
"You are not mistaken, brother. She did indeed say that."
The boyfriend, now fully sobered by the palpable menace in the air, stepped in front of his girlfriend, pulling her behind him. "Look, we didn't mean anything by it," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "We don't want any trouble. We're just gonna leave, okay?"
"Leave?"
Genesidas' lips curled into a cruel smile.
"Did I say you could leave? I asked the little lady a question, one I have yet to receive an acceptable answer to. So I shall ask it again, and this time I expect an answer. Did you, or did you not, within tonight's festivities, experience a moment of sublimation, the likes of which brought you to feel as though you were ready to..."
"Hey, what's going on over here?" A village security guard stepped out from behind a nearby longhouse, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The boyfriend didn't hesitate. Come on, Yelaine. Let's get out of here, he whispered urgently, pulling her away. The two of them scrambled into the relative safety of the firelight, casting terrified glances back at the shadows they had escaped. The guard, a seasoned man named Gideon, watched them go before turning his attention to the 9 figures clustered in the gloom. His eyes narrowed. Well, what have we here, if it isn't the usual suspects? Genesidus simply glared at him, offering no verbal reply. But the sheer look of defiance, now overlaid with something far more sinister, plainly spoke the words he withheld, clearly illustrating the level of disdain he felt for the man now standing before him. Gideon's gaze swept over the group, his years of experience honing his senses. He was a master at reading the subtle tells that betrayed a man's true intentions. A quick glance to the right, the sudden clearing of a throat, a hand that rose to smooth a wrinkle that wasn't there. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with accusation, "were it any other night, one might assume you 9 were just enjoying the festivities. However, I can't help but notice that you don't seem to be in much of a celebratory mood, leading one to wonder, in fact, why you've even come at all." He paused, letting the silence hang. He saw no nervous shifting, no clearing of throats, only cold, hard stares. "I find your appearance here especially interesting in conjunction with the news of a break-in at the larder tonight. Just moments ago, it was reported that the entire supply of some rare jerky is now mysteriously missing. Strange thing is, nothing else was taken, just that one item." The corner of Genesidus's mouth began to raise into a half-smile, a sinister smirk laced with more venom and menace than a smile had any right to bear. There it is, Gideon thought. Not a tell of guilt, but something worse, a tell of pride, of a complete lack of fear. "I only bring this up," the guard continued, his voice hardening, "because I see all 9 of you here together, and I can't help but wonder." He took a step forward, his gaze locking with Genesidus's. He asked simply and plainly, "The break-in? I don't suppose you 9 would know anything about that?" Genesidus met the guard's gaze. He slowly, with deliberate insolence, pulled a strip of the dark, glistening auroch hide jerky from his pocket. He placed it in his mouth and began to chew, his eyes never leaving Gideon's.
"Does it look like we have any knowledge of such a thing?"
The guard's face hardened, with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "You have got to be joking." His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "You do realize I'm reporting this to the council tonight, don't you?"
"Come on, boys,"
Genesidus said, turning his back on the guard with a dismissive wave.
"I think we've had quite enough entertainment for one night. Heavens no, being the dutiful members of society that we are, we wouldn't want to be late for our duty shifts tomorrow."
As the 9 of them melted back into the shadows, their only reply to the guard's threat was a defiant silence. They left him standing alone in the fading moonlight, the joyous sounds of the party now a distant echo. The festive air was suddenly cold, and a single unsettling thought remained. The darkness had not been created tonight. It had simply shown its face. Unbeknownst to the jovial peoples of Lerendor, Nana's intuition was truer than she could ever know. For on this night, a shift occurred, not on any map, but in the grand cosmic alignment. The world of Nox, this precious experiment, born of a seed sacrifice, had finally reached a predetermined age of maturity. It had crossed a threshold, the one known as the threshold of being, and in doing so, had become ripe for testing. In the great cosmic game played across galaxies and aeons, there are those who bestow grace upon nascent worlds, hoping to nurture life toward the next great step, the threshold of becoming. But such a gift, if left unchallenged, risks throwing the cosmos into existential imbalance. For what if a species, untested and unrefined, were allowed to ascend? What if their madness, their unworthiness, were allowed to fester and spread into the higher realms? This cannot be. And that is why they exist, those known only as the others. They are not of darkness, not in the simple way a mortal mind might understand it. They are the counterbalance. Their role is to test, to temper, to hammer out the impurities from any species that dares to reach for the heavens. Their stance is one of cosmic necessity. Grace afforded to those who were not, first, made to earn it, is of no value to those who have been given it. They are the force that ensures grace is not merely given, but earned. In a world like Nox, where love and hope are the currents that encourage growth, the others have little choice but to assume the opposing role. They must become the storm that batters the sapling to see if its roots are strong enough to hold. Their methods are relentless. They seek out susceptible minds, fertile soil where cruelty can take root. They plant their own seeds of influence, not through incarnation, but through insidious infiltration, whispering to the ambitious and the resentful, fanning the flames of discord until a people turn against their very selves. They do this to flush out the unworthiness for all the cosmos to witness. And in these tests, should a species be found wanting, they seldom live to regret it. And so, on this night, as the others took notice, the beings of grace, the original benefactors of Nox, granted this precious world one final gift. This night of profound, unquestioned joy was that gift. A final deep breath of untroubled air before the coming storm. For soon, very soon, a new celestial body would grace the skies of Nox, not as a passerby, but as an arrival, and with it a new seed, an instrument of the great test, would be planted in the fertile soil of this world. And from that day forward, life, as they knew it, would never be the same. Chapter 2. Vemnias. Far from the simmering resentments of Larendor, in the vast rolling greenlands of Parthgalen, legends moved on the wind. They spoke of a lone figure who appeared and vanished with the turning of the seasons, a man who brought knowledge from unseen places and hope to the most isolated of settlements. The children called him the Lightbringer, for the faint, otherworldly glow that seemed to emanate from his very being. The elders called him the Wanderer, for his ceaseless journeys. The mayors and leaders, who benefited most from his wisdom, called him the Unifier, for his presence was the one common thread that stitched their fledgling society together. He was Geldred, the Archmage, and he was the closest thing this new world had to a guardian. He moved now, a week into his latest circuit, not as a man walks, but as a silent tear in the fabric of reality. He was enshrouded in a shimmering, near-invisible shroud of manipulated air. A personal spell of his own devising he called Wind Walk. It was not a violent gale, but a perfect cylindrical conduit of bent light and compressed manicules that enveloped him, creating a low-friction barrier against the world. His footsteps were next to silent, the grass barely bending beneath his boots. The wake of his passage was not a gust, but a mere whisper, a fleeting disturbance that might cause a few leaves to gently rustle, easily mistaken for a natural sigh of the wind. He was a phantom, the focal point of this shimmering current, a tear in reality from which faint, linear rays of light seemed to shriek outwards before vanishing, leaving a dissipating trail behind him, a fleeting testament to his otherworldly speed. For years, he had traveled thus, a silent guardian moving across the vastness of Nox. He had learned to cloak the immense, crushing presence of the living nexus he carried within his chest, a constant act of will to avoid unsettling the natural balance of the world. His illustrious white archmage robes, a symbol of his station, were specially crafted. Over his heart, appearing as an ornate, silver-embroidered sigil, was a patch woven from shadow weave, a rare fiber whose threads were known to absorb and contain light, a necessary deception to conceal the true, potent glow of the radiant core he carried within. But now, as he sped across a wide meadow, he brought himself to an instant, silent halt. The shimmer of the windwalk dissipated. He had heard something. It was a faint, high-pitched sound carried on the wind, a sound of distress, small and lost. Guided by his enhanced hearing, he moved into a small copse of whisperleaf trees. There, huddled at the base of a large moss-covered stone, was a whimpering, terrified cub. It was a young, dire wolf analog, a creature known in Nox as a Draug-Hu, a species whose adults were formidable, intelligent predators. This one, however, was no more than a few months old, its oversized paws and ears giving it a clumsy, endearing appearance, its dark fur matted with dew and fear after a long, cold night away from its den. Geldred did not approach as a man would. Instead, he knelt, closing his eyes and reaching out not with his hands, but with his essence. He drew upon the immense benevolent power of the glowing sphere within him, not to command, but to align. He projected a feeling of familiarity, of kinship, of the deep instinctual safety of the pack and the warm, earthy scent of the den. He became, in that moment, a feeling of family to the lost cub. The cub's whimpering subsided, replaced by a confused whine. Its head tilted, its small, dark eyes trying to comprehend the source of this sudden, overwhelming sense of comfort. Geldred then opened his arms. The Draug-Hu cub, no longer seeing a threat, but a source of inexplicable safety, stumbled forward and collapsed into his embrace, its small body trembling from exhaustion before succumbing to a deep, trusting sleep. Cradling the cub, Geldred placed a hand on the damp earth. He was not looking for physical tracks, but for an energetic echo, the faint trail of fear and desperation the cub had left in its wake. He felt it, a thin, chaotic thread of panicked energy. Closing his eyes, he followed this thread with his mind, retracing the cub's frantic journey back towards its source. The trail led him a mile north, to a rocky outcrop cleverly hidden by a thicket of thorny bushes. He had hoped the den would be empty, but as he drew closer, a subtle warning from the world essence within him alerted him to other presences. To his chagrin, 3 adult Draug-Hu were there, their massive forms resting near the den's entrance. Upon sensing his approach, they rose as one, their initial surprise instantly hardening into lethal aggression. The fur along their spines bristled, their lips peeled back from long, yellowed fangs, and a low, guttural snarl rumbled from their deep chests. They recognized his form as human, and in their 10 years of experience, humans were either prey or a nuisance to be driven off. They began to stalk forward, a triangle of imminent death. Geldred sighed softly. He had no wish for conflict. In a gesture not of aggression, but of revelation, he let the cloak of normalcy he constantly wore fall away, releasing a mere fraction of his true presence. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. It was not a blast of light or sound, but a wave of pure, undeniable presence. The air grew heavy. The light seemed to bend around him, and the very ground hummed with his power. To the primal senses of the wolves, the unassuming man before them was suddenly transformed. He was no longer prey. He was an apex being, an alpha of a scale their instincts could not comprehend, but could not deny. He was the mountain, the storm, the unshakable heart of the world itself. Their aggressive snarls died in their throats, replaced by terrified whimpers. As one, they prostrated themselves, dropping to their bellies, their heads bowed low to the ground, tails tucked, exposing their throats in the ultimate gesture of submission. With the threat neutralized, Geldred restored his concealment. He walked calmly forward and gently placed the sleeping cub amongst its siblings near the den's entrance. He looked at the 3 still cowering adults, a kind smile on his face.
Be at peace,
he whispered, his voice a gentle reassurance.
May your pack thrive, and your hunts be successful.
He gave a final, respectful nod and turned, leaving the wolf family to their stunned and profound relief. This was Geldred's main goal, the purpose that drove his endless wandering, to uphold the cause his father had died for. It was not merely to protect mankind, but to maintain the delicate balance of Nox itself, to be a steward to all its life, fostering an environment where every being, from the smallest cub to the most ambitious man, could grow and hopefully evolve beyond their baser instincts. He carried the orb of his father's sacrifice, not as a weapon, but as a responsibility, a constant connection to the world's well-being, and he would do whatever was necessary to see his father's will done. His journey continued. He visited a small outlying hamlet of no more than 30 people, nestled in a valley. Here, the mayor was a greedy, short-sighted man who was hoarding the village's supply of a rare, iron-rich root vital for forging strong tools. Geldred did not confront him with magic or force. Instead, during the evening meal, he spoke to the villagers, not of the mayor's greed, but of a new, more efficient smithing technique he had learned from the mages in Eithilgard, one that could make their tools last twice as long, if they had access to the proper amount of the root. He planted the seed of knowledge, empowering the villagers to question, and eventually to remedy their own situation, a subtle act of guidance that honored his father's memory by avoiding his past mistakes. Months passed in this manner. He traveled his circuit, a welcome and celebrated guest in every village, a bringer of news, technology, and hope. It was in a small trading post south of the Weeping Sands that he first heard the rumor. It began as a whisper, a fragment of a story told by a traveling merchant. He was walking with the village mayor when he caught it.
Excuse me.
Geldred interrupted gently.
What was that you said just now? A miraculous healing?
The mayor's face lit up. Oh yes, Archmage. It's the talk of all Parth Galen. Haven't you heard? They say there's a miracle worker in Larendor. A child, some say. Old Elspeth, the seeress from Oakhaven, you know the one? She was on a caravan to the quarterly gathering. Broke her leg something fierce. Bones sticking out, festering it was. They thought she was done for. But this child... They say he laid hands on her, and by the next morning she was walking. Walking. Some are even saying he can reverse aging, put a severed man back together good as new. Geldred kept his expression calm, though his heart hammered in his chest. He knew the nature of rumor, how a seed of truth could grow into a forest of exaggeration. Yet, a child, a healer, in Larendor. That night sleep would not come. For 10 long years he had wandered, he had guided, he had waited, always hoping, always searching for a sign of his father's prophesied return. He stood under the light of the 4 moons, his gaze turned towards the south, towards the heartland. Could it be? After all this time, could this be the one he had been waiting for? The one he had spent the last 10 years searching for? The path of his circuit was forgotten. His duty to the other villages could wait. A new, more urgent purpose now guided his steps. His journey now had a singular, unwavering destination. Larendor. 2 days later, a shadow passed over the western gate of Larendor. It was not a cloud, but a magnificent bird of prey, a hawk analogue known to the mages of the north as an aethel hawk. Its feathers shimmered with an almost metallic, coppery sheen, and its eyes held an unnerving intelligence. It circled once before descending with silent folded wings, landing not on the palisade wall, but on a specific solitary perch of white stone set just inside the gatehouse. A perch that, for long, quiet stretches of time, remained unoccupied, its use reserved for matters of great import. The gatekeepers, 2 sturdy men who normally carried themselves with a relaxed vigilance, immediately stiffened. The arrival of the hawk was a rare and deeply serious event. They knew through Mayor Alaric's strict and unwavering protocol that this was no common message. A hushed urgency fell over them. One of them carefully approached the perch. The hawk watched him, unblinking, and extended a leg, to which a small sealed leather scroll was tied. One of the inner gatekeepers, a stern man named Alistair, took the scroll with a reverent hand. He turned to the 2 young apprentices on duty for the second shift, a boy named Bram and his quiet companion, Orin. His gaze fell upon Bram. "You," he said, extending the scroll, "to the mayor's office. Directly. No stops." Bram nodded, his eyes wide with the importance of the task, and sprinted away. His path took him away from the main industrial district and through the civic heart of Larendor. He passed the quiet, clean halls of the infirmary, where the air was kept sterile by softly glowing green crystals, and the large guild house, where the leaders of the various crafting guilds convened. The scent of aged wood and ink wafted from the open doors of the cartographer's workshop within as he sped past, his focus unwavering. He reached the familiar mayor's longhouse and was immediately granted entry by the door guard, who recognized the urgency of a runner's pace. The boy handed the message to the mayor's personal attaché, a stern but fair man named Gregor. Gregor, in turn, entered the office and placed the scroll on the mayor's desk. Mayor Alaric looked up from his work. He was a man in his mid-30s, with the weary eyes of a leader who carried the weight of 1,000 souls and the calm, aristocratic bearing of a past life he rarely spoke of. He took the scroll, broke the familiar wax seal, and read. As he did, a deep sigh escaped him, a sound of profound, weary resignation. He placed his forehead in his hand, the scroll trembling slightly.
"What have you done, Vemnias?"
he thought.
"You sweet, compassionate, wonderfully reckless child. What have you done? It would appear life in this fragile new world is about to become a great deal more complicated. After all these years spent in a deliberate, protective concealment, it seems the secret is out."
The message was from Geldrid, terse and to the point. The Archmage had heard the rumors of the healing child and was now on his way to Larendor to investigate this urgent matter. He would arrive in 3 days. Alaric spent the rest of the afternoon in deep, troubled thought, the weight of the Archmage's impending arrival settling upon him. That evening, as the blue sun began its slow descent and the 4 moons started their ascent, he finally dispatched Gregor with a simple, verbal message. The attaché roamed the village, his steps purposeful, asking after the boy. He eventually found him in the terraced gardens on the village's northeastern slopes, just as the evening meal was beginning in the square below. It was him, the same olive-skinned boy with the head of jet-black curls. Genesidas had seen him all those months ago, peering at him through the door flaps of the infirmary, as the boy offered aid to a seemingly ailing elderly woman who was lying on the cot. Now, as Gregor approached, the young boy was helping the garden tenders, his small hands deftly weeding around a patch of star-petal flowers. His presence a quiet source of joy to the women working there. "Vemnias," Gregor said, his tone respectful. "Mayor Alaric has requested you join him for a meal this evening at his longhouse." Vemnias looked up, his dark eyes inquisitive, a knowing, playful light dancing within them. He suspected this was more than a simple invitation.
"Did he say why, Gregor?"
The attaché shook his head, his expression unreadable. He did not. Only that he wished for your company. Later that evening, in the simple main room of Alaric's home, the two sat across from each other. Alaric, for all his pragmatism, found himself struggling to begin. He looked at this boy, who was both a child and something impossibly ancient, the village's greatest gift and its most perilous secret.
"So,"
Alaric began, his voice heavy,
"any guesses as to why I've asked you to speak with me tonight?"
Vemnias, ever intuitive, likely knew, but he feigned innocence with a gentle, mischievous smile. It was a familiar dance between them, a quirky relationship that was less mayor to child and more akin to a weary but loving older brother speaking to a prodigy he could never fully control. Alaric's expression remained grave, his gaze unwavering.
"This is not a time for games, my child. I need you to be with me now. Truly, with me."
He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet room.
"Vemnias, a message arrived today from Geldrid."
The smile on Vemnias's face faded, replaced by a quiet understanding.
"He has heard the rumors, son. The tales of a miraculous healing."
Alaric leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table, his gaze intense.
"The seeress from Oakhaven, Elspeth, That was the old woman from the caravan a few months back, wasn't it? The one with the leg wound so grievous we all thought she wouldn't see the next sunrise?
Vemnius gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Alaric let out another sigh, this one laced with self-recrimination. He rubbed his temples.
I should have known. By the 4 moons, I should have seen it. The next morning, she walked out of here as if she'd merely had a bad night's sleep. I heard the whispers, but I dismissed them as hopeful tales. I should have been more vigilant.
He looked at Vemnius, his expression a mixture of frustration and profound affection.
I blame myself. I've been too loose with you, given you too much freedom to wander where your heart leads. Perhaps I need to pay closer attention to your movements from now on.
The veiled threat hung in the air, but it was born not of anger, but of a desperate, protective fear.
That one act of compassion, Vemnius,
Alaric continued, his voice softening, his gaze piercing,
was seen. Not just by those in the infirmary, but by others. It is the seed from which these dangerous rumors have grown. A single moment of your true nature revealed, and now the world is listening. Vemnius, my child,
Alaric said, his voice softening further with the protective affection of a father.
I don't fault you for your inability to truly grasp the volatility of the situation that your existence, or word of your existence, foretells. Were you any other child, I don't expect that you ever even could, nor would you really have any reason to be expected to. But you're not just any other child, are you? The things you can do. The things you have done. My child, in the world I come from, the world your parents came from, along with every other person here that has reached the age of adulthood, our way of life was not like this. Not at all like the communal societal structure we have all out of necessity, and the need for reliance upon one another for survival, come to enjoy. The world we came from was one of conflict, constant and never-ending. It was a world in which those with power used that power in order to take from those without, all from the desire to obtain even greater power. To attain that which others, who might one day challenge or threaten their power, might find valuable or enviable, in order to possess a greater claim for the right to rule over more lands, more people, and more ways to accrue more power. It was men like these, men who called themselves kings, a title that was inherited by birthright and handed down from one generation to the next, who built massive armies of men and weapons of death and destruction, all for the sake of acquiring more power, costing lives beyond count throughout the many centuries of monarchical rule. This was the world we knew. To men like these, to minds like these, do you have any idea what you would have represented to them? Lad, whether for the sake of acquisition or persecution, had one, such as yourself, been born into that world, these men would have thrust all the lands under their rule into complete and utter chaos. The wars and the feuds would have been endless, all just to get their hands on you. I mean, look at you. You literally have the ability to restore life. Maybe not to the same extent in man and in animals as you have with more basic plant life. But still, to be able to fully mend any wound, any injury, any ailment, no matter how severe or dire, who can say what other greatness lies ahead for you in the potential that you wield? All that you are, Vemnius, it has never been witnessed before. And even more troubling is the realization that I have absolutely no idea how to even guide you through this becoming. You are a complete mystery and an anomaly, one that myself and the other members of the council have spent a vast majority of our time here trying to keep concealed from the rest of the world. For we have not been in this land quite so long as for those of our old world lineage to have forgotten their desire for distinction, their primal human need to feel more exalted than those around them. That same human instinct, that wanting for more, simply for the sake of wanting more, still lingers within many who now inhabit this land, where a mind of the wrong leanings to suddenly get ideas in their head of how they might better put your gifts to use. Can you imagine the far-reaching possible outcomes for how quickly this shaky establishment of cooperation throughout all our villages, especially the not-so-well-off villages who live far less favorable lives than that of Laerendor? Imagine the reactions of those who feel slighted or disenfranchised based solely on what region of path Galen they happen to land in upon their arrival. Our position here in Laerendor is far more favorable than you imagine, that being doubly so when compared to the crudely underdeveloped villages of some of our near and far neighboring settlements. In the short 10 years since we've arrived, already we've developed something of a judgment out of envy position with some of our less contented neighbors. Neighbors who, though seemingly diplomatic now, even if just in appearance, might become frightfully hostile at a moment's notice for any perceived incentive that may convince them that such an incursion might offer to them even the slightest possibility of a better life. For those living in a place of feeling as though they have less, for those who still harbor within them the mental leanings of our old world, long left behind. To hear of Laerendor, that envy of the land now also, possessing among all the other gifts they were seemingly blessed by the world itself to have been given a miracle child who keeps them free of all ails. This is not a path to peace. I have, for 10 years, deliberately kept this a secret even from Geldred himself. A monumental breach of etiquette and trust. Geldred and I have established a relationship of absolute trust and transparency, yet I felt a compelling need to keep this one secret close to my chest. He and I are as open with each other about everything as a father and son, and it is a burden that weighs heavily on me, knowing I will soon have to explain my justification for withholding this secret. And though I do not believe he will be accusatory or cast blame upon me, my own shame and guilt at having hidden this from him for so long is a cross I will bear alone. I am so sorry, my child, for not being a better steward of your secrecy.
Vemnias sat in stunned, unblinking silence. The mayor's words a cold, sobering flood that washed away his childish understanding of the world. The weight of it was staggering. He felt his smile, his constant companion, slowly fall from his face, replaced by a hollow emptiness he had never known. The village, which he had always seen as a place of unity and shared joy, was now revealed to him as a fragile, delicate thing, a temporary harmony built upon a ground of old-world fear, greed, and envy. It was a realization of a stark, brutal contrast between the innocence in his heart and the cold realities of the world. He was no longer just the boy who brought laughter and comfort. He was a catalyst, a potential source of great conflict and unimaginable chaos. The world seemed to swim in a sea of his own naivety. After a long time, he finally rose from his chair, a silent, contemplative figure. Mayor Alaric watched him go, a profound and sorrowful understanding in his eyes. Vemnias, leaving the mayor's office, stepped back out into the town square. It was nearing the end of the day, and the square was filled with the sounds of the evening meal. The air, rich with the scent of roasted meat and savory spices, was thick with the happy sounds of conversation and the high-pitched laughter of children at play. And yet, Vemnias felt none of it. He walked as if in a dream, his mind a maelstrom of thoughts as he navigated the crowded tables of unity. And as he walked, men and women from their tables of kinship looked up, and without any prompting, their faces would light up with a smile as they would give a wave, a nod, or a friendly greeting. He, in turn, would respond with a quiet nod, a forced smile, and a brief word of greeting. An empty echo of his former self, just to, as always, keep up appearances. His footsteps, though light, felt heavy. He found his way to the outskirts of the town square, the joyful noises of the evening meal beginning to fade into the background, replaced by the deep, rhythmic groan and churn of the great watermill on the river, its power a constant thrum, felt even within the walls. He passed the granary, where Scrupulon, along with the other weary staff members, were finally finishing their long day's work. Vemnias smiled at them with a genuine empathic warmth, and Scrupulon, seeing Vemnias, gave a wide, jovial smile back at him, feeling the warmth of the boy's presence, not understanding the burden behind the smile. As Vemnias walked on, his mind, though still troubled by the mayor's words, began to settle. He began to take in the village, the world around him, in a way he never had before. He saw the buildings, the workshops, the terraced gardens, but now he saw them as more than just structures. He saw the life within them, a vibrant memory of 1,000 smiles and 1,000 joyful moments. He saw the laughing children he knew, their faces illuminated by the hearthlight grills in the town square. He saw the men, strong and proud, their hands calloused from honest labor, their hearts full from a day of meaningful contribution. He saw the women weaving blankets and clothing from the resilient fibers of Noxian flora, their hands working with the loving diligence of a mother working for her family. He saw it all, every part of this community he had known his entire life. The silent industrial buildings, the quiet streets and homes, all came alive in his mind's eye, and a powerful, unyielding conviction began to take root in his soul, a burning flame of purpose he had not felt before. He walked past the stables, the warm smell of the grave haulers filling the air, and found himself standing on a small rise at the edge of the village, overlooking the vast rolling greenlands of Parth Galen. Unbeknownst to Vemnias, it was the same clearing where Genesidus had stood, mere months ago, the day he declared that what he had in this world was not enough. This evening, however, as Vemnias stood there, looking out onto the world, the sky was a breathtaking tapestry of deep blues, dotted with the 4 moons of Nox, each casting a different hue of light upon the landscape. The silent howl of a dire wolf echoed faintly in the distance, a sound that, to his ears, was not of a predator, but of a proud, wild creature, calling out a song to the night. He looked out into the vastness of the world, and then turned to look at the village behind him, its lights a warm, golden glow. against the dark of the night. A tiny beacon of life against an infinite backdrop of stars. For a long, profound moment, he stood in silent contemplation, his heart and soul at peace, a sense of purpose and resolve cementing within him. The profound conviction that had taken root in his soul was not a response to darkness, but a testament to the light. He knew, with an unshakable sense of destiny, that the seeds of a new beginning, a final hope for mankind, had been planted here. This world, he realized, was everything he could ever want or hope for. He said nothing, only smiled a small, sad, and beautiful smile. He turned his gaze from the distant horizon and back to the glowing lights of his home. You have just experienced the dawning moments of a new reality, a special pre-release presentation of the prologue to Nox Origins. The tapestry of this nascent world, Nox, is vast and newly woven, its threads imbued with ancient sacrifice, the promise of untold magic, and the ever-present shadow of encroaching conflict. What you have heard is but the first echo of a saga that will span an age. The true story of Nox, and the destinies of all who now call it home, has only just begun to whisper its secrets. The full, epic journey into this world, with all its trials, transformations, and the awakening of powers beyond imagining, is being forged. This is Nicholas Taylor. We sincerely hope you have enjoyed this special pre-release edition of Nox Origins. We invite you to hold fast to this glimpse, to anticipate the unfolding of this grand design, and to look for future tidings as we prepare for the complete release. The adventure of Nox Origins truly awaits. Thank you for listening.